since you guys all know me.
Would you like to introduce her, or shall I introduce her?
Well, yes, you introduce her. I didn't need to. Hold on, I want to see if this is working. Okay.
Oh, you put that on full screen after you're done.
Okay.
All right. As I called you out this morning and told you guys, this is a different format on how we deliver knowledge, like moving the textbook into the next level, into experience transfer, knowledge transfer. This whole class is built around experts and leaders in the industry. Yeah? And what I call the contemporary exchange of knowledge, aka we have not just one single speaker, we have a team of panelists and speakers, and every session will have a different, slightly different format. Yeah? Depending on who's around in the chemistry. Today we're running 2 and 2s. Next session we have 3 in the morning scheduled, and maybe even 4 in the afternoon. Yeah? So we'll see. Every session is a little bit different, and it reflects the character of the industry as well, because we're talking about different facets of A, the stages in real estate development, and B, what do they actually represent in terms of expertise. So we have a tiny facet we learned earlier this morning about Tony's background and Tony's work. And he slotted up already in next PowerPoint to give you another facet of his background and his work. But we exchanged our panel a little bit, and I am delighted to have another distinguished member of my advisory board in the room, Devl. And Debbie is different from all of us. Well, not anymore. You're a lawyer too. She has a law background, yeah? To keep it a little bit more of an easy way. She's also a partner at Holland & Knights for Lauderdale and DC offices. She practices in the areas of land development and environmental law, with specific experience in planning, infrastructure planning and financing, zoning, subdivision controls, and community redevelopment, as well as state, regional, local roles in land use decision making. Remember, we had this on the right side, the red bullet point list with land use attorney, and then site planner, maybe even engineer. She's one of those attorneys, including the planning background. Yeah? Greg gave us a wonderful breakdown on how he approaches the entitlement development process. Really wonderful. Ms. Olszewski has represented private developers and government agencies as special counsel and has intimate knowledge of the land use planning process. In addition, she is a frequent speaker at state and national seminars on the land development process, as well as infrastructure planning and funding. And from my own experiences, that 10-15-minute chat you have in between the board meetings and other functions, it is absolutely a pleasure to have you here, because she is a wonderful resource of knowledge. And when it comes to planning, all these little tiny facets, and then how to actually go around the corner to make it a really nice product is absolutely fantastic. And we went on, Archie and I, we went to the NEA award ceremony on Thursday night. We actually passed that street corner. You and I had a discussion with Kona a while ago, and I'm like, based on the description of the intersection and description, that's her little stepchild or whatever development process you're in right now. And she had a fantastic story. Maybe you have a PowerPoint slide for that as well.
No, I don't, but I can talk about it.
Yeah.
That's a nightmare.
So, not exactly, good buzzword. Not everything works smooth. And one thing I need you to understand, and Greg and Tony alluded this morning, you need to learn from your mistakes. Yeah? In terms of the planning world, I keep saying to my former planning students, if you're the planner and you're doing something, you're like this push-up clown. Yeah? Bounce up and stand up. Because in that career and development you are in right now, mistakes are good. The difference is made by who you are in terms of standing up and do the mistake again and again and again, or be better than that. Yeah? For those who had my GIS class, to finish that, some of those assignments are like running with 120 miles per hour against a concrete wall. You do that at least 4 times in my class. But you succeed. He's laughing about it because he at least had one panic attack and succeeded with a good grade. Everyone.
Every Saturday, yeah.
On that note, I want you to succeed in this class. Fire away with your panel. They are prepared. They did the readings from the textbook. Tell them what is in between the lines of a stereotype textbook, please. It's all yours.
I've suggested first thing is for Debbie just tell us a little bit about herself.
Yeah, and maybe go around again in the room so you guys actually have a little bit idea of who's
Great
who
idea.
and the background, how long they're in the program, what they do maybe in the professional world before they came or right now, to give you an idea on that.
Okay.
Great.
It's all yours.
So, good afternoon, everybody. Stand up. No, stand up.
Yeah, no.
It's Saturday. I'm exhausted. It's been a long week. Hi. So Tony asked me to first tell you how I got to where I am in my career. So let me first tell you where I'm at. I am a land use and environmental lawyer. I practice with Holland & Knight. I've been with Holland & Knight for 3 years. Before that, I was with another very large firm, Greenwood Traurig, for 32 years. And in year 30, I kind of got bored and decided to do a little bit of a change up. And if anybody wants to talk about all the thirds of your life, that's yet another thing that we could probably talk about. But I was in undergraduate school, and I was at Washington University. I was an Asian Studies major. It was the ancient times, and Nixon had just opened up China, and I was going to be doing something in China. So I had this crazy idea to become fluent in Chinese. That lasted 1 semester. I got home that Christmas holiday and said to my family, I can't do this, I don't know what I'm going to do, I'm at this great liberal arts college, there's all this stuff out there, I don't know what to do. And my brother wisely says to me, just take a little bit of everything and see where you want to go now. So that's what I did, and I ended up taking a course in urban studies. And it was this broad brush planning, sociology, we call it human geography today, for those of you who have done that AP stuff. And I found something that lit my fire. I could get passionate about all the issues of building communities. And I kind of realized that that was the thing that was exciting to me. So I ended up being an urban studies major. I was fortunate to be at a university that allowed undergraduates to take courses in the School of Architecture. And if any of you know, WashU has this amazing architecture school. I took courses at the law school in land use law. And by the end of my going into my senior year, went to one of my planning professors and said, where should I go for my planning degree? And he says, you don't want to be a planner. Nobody listens to planners. I loved your idea. They do actually listen to them today, but the idea that planners are, the dummies that get punched and put
Oh, that's a professional planner, that's not the academic one.
Yeah,
well, So,
Who was that planning professor, do you remember?
Gary, and I can't remember his last name. It was 1975. I don't remember much.
I might have read some work of his.
Yeah,
You know.
unlikely. So he said, why don't you become a lawyer? You could be a lawyer and still do this land planning stuff. So I listened to him. And it wasn't until my second year of law school at GW where I had a land use law professor who I walked up to afterwards and said to him, this was Frank Schnidman, who is someone now in this community, and I said to Frank, I want to be you when I grow up. Because he had finally given me enough information that I could see the combination of land use planning and law coming together. And just to give you an idea of what I do today, I practice law and I practice politics. And one of the things about, I know what Greg said about entitlement lawyers, but a big part of what
they're expensive.
works for me, and worth every penny. And I think you have to be politically involved and politically aware in order to be successful in this business. It is inherently, the entitlement process is inherently a political process. You have to have all the technical stuff, which is where it comes in that you gotta practice law, make sure your clients know, your lawyer has to know what they're doing, but they also have to understand the politics of the situation and be sensitive to changing whims. Just as an aside, and those of you who follow Fort Lauderdale politics, I have been advising clients for about 3 months that the world as they know it is changing on March 20th. We have a new mayor in town. We have a whole new perspective, and we've been advising clients 3 months to posture themselves in their business and development efforts for that eventuality. Because the other thing you have to be in this business is strategic. You have to, it's a chess game, and it's multi-level. Did you ever follow, any of you watch Star Trek? I don't remember which it was TV Star Trek, but they did 3-level chess. And that's what this business is also. Both the business side of it, the political side of it, the financial side of it. If you think of it as 3-level chess, that'll give you a good mental image. So I went to law school and ended up leaving DC and moving down to Florida because I had this crazy project in Collier County called Golden Gate Estates, which was land that was underwater and was representing Collier County in front of the Federal Trade Commission in DC. And during the course of that representation, got to know a lot of people in Florida who said, you know, got a lot of vacant land and a lot of people coming. It was 1980, and they were right. And I moved down here, joined a small firm, and practiced with a small boutique land use firm for about 3 years. They happened, one of our major clients happened to own half of what is today Miramar and Pembroke Pines. There was nothing west of University Drive. University was a 2-lane road, and I was representing someone who owned 10,000 acres that would become cities, and cut my teeth on that. Did a presentation at the Dade County Commission in spring of 1983, and a gentleman walked up to me after the presentation and said, "Want to have breakfast?" "Hi, I'm Bob Trorig." And if any of you know or the history of Bob Trorig, Bob was well, he is still around, but he is certainly not practicing. He was the dean of zoning. He created the first wave of what became the city of Miami and everything you know in that area. And Bob asked me to breakfast, and 4 days later, I went from a 4-person boutique firm to the 82nd person on a letterhead that would ultimately grow to a firm of 1,800 lawyers. And I share that in part because you never know when somebody's going to open a door for you. And I also share it because along the way there were people like Bob Trorig and Frank Schnidman and Tony Trella who really helped pull me into the business and to expand my perspective of it to not just be a lawyer, but to be someone who was a community builder, and community in the very broad sense. So that's what I meant.
Great. You know, this is another example based on our conversation this morning of how there is no straight line to the top. And if you're out there looking for it, you're never going to find it. And it's just, life takes you different places and you know, when I was before real estate, if somebody told me I was going to spend 40 years of my life in real estate, I would have looked at it and like, what are you talking about? You know, and so this is where you are and where you go in life and where life takes you. That's the great journey.
Can they go around?
Yeah, well, that's what I suggested. Why don't we just go around and help Debbie and I understand a little bit about you and what you're doing and so forth. What was thought of you.
Okay, my name's Ken. I'm a property manager. I was born and raised.
Oh, wait a
in
minute,
South
excuse me,
Florida.
one more thing.
Sure.
Sorry.
No problem.
I have to ask your indulgence. I can only hear in one ear, so I don't ask, you don't need to shout, but at the same time, just try to keep that in mind a little bit. I can't hear whispers, so thank you.
All right, my name's Ken. I grew up in South Florida. I'm a property manager at Deerfield Beach. I manage only multifamily and a couple of associations. And I'm basically done with the program after this semester. I have one more class after this, so should be done in June.
You're almost there.
Yep.
Hi, I'm Kristen. I work here at Nova in the new MD school that they're starting. We're building a hospital. We're building a new HPD building. Other student spaces that we have to come on, new classrooms, new things, new technology. So I help with all the, more specifically, the strategic planning. I basically help put together our advisory board over there. I work with those individuals. I kind of just do a little of everything right now because our area is so small, and everybody's branching out doing a lot of different things. But yeah, I'm almost done with the program as well. I'm on the same track with Ken, so I finish this semester. I have one more class after, but we're graduating this semester, and I think that's it.
Hi, my name is Marcela. This is my first year, actually my first semester in this program. I work for a real estate developer.
But who?
A real estate developer.
Who?
Oh, Capital Residential. They do a lot of work in Atlanta, North Carolina. They have some jobs in New Jersey. So it's basically from here doing stuff out of the state. It's a small company, so small team, and we all help each other do different stuff, like do the due diligence period, taking care of the contracts, and making sure that all the GCs are providing all the information, lien waivers, all of that.
My name is Chris. I'm originally from Costa Rica, and I work with an investment firm. I do acquisitions of distressed properties to flip, and I also do that on my own. And this is my first semester here as well.
RJ Klein. I moved down here right out of undergrad from the Philadelphia area a couple months ago. Basically, my interest in real estate development, I guess, stems through a couple different things. My dad was a real estate agent, so I guess I had some sort of real estate bias. For many years in high school and early college, I worked for a contractor where I was a laborer, but I was introduced to a developer. I guess that's where I first got my taste of development. And then as a finance major, I just was looking for a different path. So I'll be finishing up here this summer, and yeah, pretty happy with my decision to come down so far.
My name is Payman. We're almost the same. We're in the same category. We're almost done in June, hopefully. So we will have that MSRED on our business card hopefully soon. Been in real estate for around 18 years, but mostly international, not in the US. We're trying to invest more. I'm trying to learn how to do developments in the US, so that's what I'm doing.
My name is Daniel Ponce. I'm from Venezuela. I'm a civil engineer, and this is my second semester on the master. I'm trying to learn more about real estate development.
My name is Thomas. I have a PhD in regional planning.
Who let you in a room?
I work as a site planner for small towns in Delaware, more with GS work on it as well. And my mentor and dear friend thought it was a great idea to kick me out and send me to grad school for my PhD. And I'm here for 2 years already, 2 years in person at Nova, and I'm just getting started. Really high energy. Everyone was like, we are out of the door. Now I'm going to open up more doors.
My name is Diego. I work in sales in an industry that's not related to real estate. I'm new to real estate. I'm halfway through the program, and I'm looking to raise capital to invest and get, know what I'm doing and how to get things going.
I'm Andrea. I'm an international student from Montenegro, and I have one more class after this to graduate. And after I graduate, I plan to work in and gain experience in the real estate industry.
Hi, my name is Woody Hughes. I've been in real estate land acquisitions for about 10 or 12 years, and now I work for Habitat for Humanity. I do our acquisitions, our planning, our design, permitting of land, and permitting of the houses, kind of a lot. I just started the program last semester, and it's been great so far, great all the way around.
My name is Evan Eckstein. I'm from Toronto, Canada. I moved down here in August to start the program. So the program's going very, very well so far. I was working for a real estate developer back in Toronto where I developed my passion for real estate development and decided to pursue the master's.
My name is Eduardo. I'm proud to have Tony as my mentor. I work with real estate as well. My family in Brazil, and I'm working here now with real estate investments.
Hi, my name is Graham Waldron. I'm a site designer. I do site planning and landscape architecture. I work for a multidisciplinary firm up in West Palm Beach.
Which firm?
WGI.
We know them.
We know.
Okay.
You're fired.
I'll be done in the summer. I guess the reason why I'm here is I want to bridge the gap between planning, LA, and development.
Hi, my name is Judy. I'm a real estate broker for a small firm. I've been doing real estate for approximately 13 years. I'm looking to expand my knowledge in the industry, and this is my first day in the program.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Carlos. I started the program last year. Halfway done. Fully graduating also in June. I'm currently doing an internship with Marcus and Militia. This is mainly focused on commercial development, but we discussed pretty much every real estate type, and looking forward for any networking events.
Hi, I'm Dara. I am a paralegal. I deal with commercial and residential property damage insurance claims. So every day I'm dealing with carriers, engineers, desk assistants, adjusters, clients, and everything in between that. I'm in the real estate development program because I feel like I have a passion, a burning sensation, just to be more in depth in it, build as much experience and get as involved as possible in this industry.
Are you with a legal firm?
Yes.
And who's your mentor?
Debbie.
Hi everybody, I'm Val again. I'm a district property manager, so I have a high rise in downtown I'm managing. I have one in Margate that's just a few days from CO, so I'm going a little bit crazy. I'm in the program part-time because work right now is pretty intense. I'm also a licensed real estate agent, and I'm here to either bridge into commercial or try to jump into the development side of my employer, because he not only builds, but he's also develops and he manages. So his portfolio is expanding very quickly. So.
Does he encourage you to do this?
Yeah.
Good. Is he paying for it?
I'm going to submit the receipts.
Work on it. Work on it. Tell him, there's an ad on television where, I don't know if you saw it, they have this young girl and it says, why did she get this, go to school and rack up all this debt? Why did she spend so much for this to get married? Why did you? And it ends with, for you, when you hire her, she's all ready.
Yeah.
It's a great ad.
Hello everyone, my name is Jack. I'm from Haiti. I just graduated with MBA in finance. My goal was to pursue a PhD in economy, but after I talked to a couple of friends of mine, I've been interested in having more knowledge in real estate, and actually work as a stock trader.
Is this your first day?
This is actually my second class.
Your second class, okay.
Hello, my name is Nora. I come from Switzerland. I started the program in January. I'm an accountant, and everyone is an accountant anymore. So I thought about, I wanted to change my life, change the new direction. And as long as the real estate, it seems to be exciting. I found that program and I know.
Well, you heard two accountants this morning, both say they didn't want to be
that's
accountants
what I
anymore.
said, I'm in the right track.
Craig's not CPA.
Oh, that's funny.
And I majored in undergraduate in accounting, and both of us finally said, we don't want to be accountants.
I'm Juliana. I'm from Brazil as well. I have a background in architecture and site planning, and my family do real estate development in Brazil, so I'm getting into it right now.
Right.
Yeah, my name's John. I'm an attorney in Boca Raton. My area of practice is primarily in the area of foreclosure defense. And this is my fourth graduate program here at Nova, so it's my MBA here and Master's in Resource Management. And I'm interested in expanding to all things real estate, so I'll just talk to you in different areas. But this is my second class in this program.
You're like a professional student.
I am.
My name's Quasi. I'll be graduating as well in the summer. We'll actually have one more class to take next year. That's real estate development process 2. Then I'll be finished. As well as the agent. We're interested in getting involved in the real estate development process.
Okay, well, thank you all very much. But Debbie, one of the things that I told them this morning, and I told previous classes, that when you're struggling to get through this thing, and it's hard, just remember that when you get your degree, you can put the letters MSRED after your name forever. No one can ever take that away from you. It separates you from everybody else. And so, if you're ever looking for some motivation or some reason why I'm going to kill myself doing this, maybe that'll help a little bit. Okay. This morning, we touched on a number of things. We heard a great, very amazing story, and told you a little bit about myself, and then Greg went into an illustration of what he would do today if he was going to develop a new piece of land, and what he feels he would have to go through, and we went through a bunch of specific things and so forth. This afternoon, we're going to give you some of that, but at a different angle. I'm going to start off by taking you through what I think, if you ask yourself the question, what can I do with this MSRED degree? Where can this lead to? Where can it fit in real estate? How many places it can be applied or so forth? I'm going to go through a presentation on that subject. Then I'm going to switch to, Debbie's going to take us through, I would say, a pretty intense entitlement project that she did. The developer was kind enough to provide all his information and his loan presentation and a whole bunch of things. And it's a live project, and I think it went forward, right?
It's built. It's built, it's done, and it's...
So instead of a hypothetical project, we're going to take you through a real project that went through it all, and it's finished and successful.
And had literally every conceivable issue that a residential development can have, including it's a former golf course, so it had arsenic contamination. It is a public well field. Now the arsenic and the well field, I'll explain how that fits together. That is still in use in the city of Pompano Beach. Surrounded on one side by a trailer park. That was kind of interesting. And required every land use entitlement and approval that you could ever need in raw dirt. So I think you'll find it kind of interesting. By the way, I started working on the project in 2004, and we broke ground with the developer, which is ZOM, was the major developer on this, broke ground in 2015. That one is a little bit longer than many of them, but one of the things as a land use lawyer, your projects become an annuity. I literally stopped. It's 2017 was the last time I billed any time on that project. They closed it out when we were finished. There was one last detail. I gave it away at that point. It was like enough for anyone. I don't want to open a new file. So yeah, is that the point?
Yeah, Atlantic and like the turnpike.
Yeah.
You know, goes to what we said, I don't know if we actually said it this morning, I think I said it to someone else before. The thing about real estate, regardless what the project is, whether it's 1 acre or it's 1,000 acres, whether it's, you know, whatever, commercial, retail, I don't care. Every single project is different. Every single project starts off with a blank canvas. And you learn all this methodology, and you learn all these things and everything, but you still have to come up with a one-of-a-kind painting.
By the way, it's a blank canvas with warts. They all have warts.
Can we enlarge this, or?
F5. F5.
Not that, it's for almost 40 years, trust me.
Want to take further?
No, I just thought maybe.
Doesn't go deep.
Can you see that old fan?
I can dim down the lights.
Yeah, that's awesome. I have this for you. Okay.
Yeah.
These are what I would consider the 7 major categories of the breakdown of the real estate industry. By the way, I can send you this, and so.
Still take notes?
So yeah, I mean, this is. The cost will be just billed to you next 2 weeks. Anyway, land development, home building, office development, retail development, industrial development, capital markets, and professional consultants. I don't, by the way, claim that this is absolutely 100% perfect, but it's got about 40 years of my knowledge in this thing, so I think it comes pretty close. First one was land development. So he said, well, what is land development? Well, we heard a lot this morning about different pieces. But if you're going to be in land development or involved in land development, you're going to have to touch almost every one of these things at some time. And there's due diligence we talked about this morning, go, no-go decisions, financing structure, market, surveying the land, close the transaction, environmental issues, wetlands, animal species. We saw this all, land planning, entitlement, zoning, traffic, hydrology, development work, the construction itself. And then you may either sell it or you may bank it as an asset on your books, or, but here's the thing, as a professional in the real estate industry, we know, Debbie and I, and people like us know, we know people who specialize just in one line of this. They make a full career and a lot of money out of it. I mean, people that do serious market research, that's a whole industry unto itself. And people who are involved in these different environmental issues and so forth. So it isn't a matter of that you will do every one of these every time you do a project. You may wind up in life in one particular area and make a whole career out of it.
Tony, before you go off this, let me add, we agreed we were going to interrupt and do this thing, so you guys should feel free to do the same thing. But the one thing that I think in transactions today, the majority of any deal today, you do not close before entitlement. That you're, there's just too much entitlement risk. Lenders are unwilling, certainly even acquisition lenders are unwilling to take that the entitlement risk. And so I think, I don't know when you get to structuring the deal, but I would say that 98, 99% of the deals that I work on are subject to getting entitlements.
And we talked about that from a different angle this morning, where we asked that question of Craig, and he said that's where you got to get some kind of maybe buy some time from the seller, maybe put up option money or that at risk. You know, try to buy the time to do that, because I think someone asked, will anybody lend you money without this? And of course, Debbie just said, no one's gonna lend you the money without
What if
this.
you're a big pocket?
Excuse me?
What if you're a big pocket, I mean, investor, and they don't want to lose you? What they gonna do?
Well, if that's a smart investor, they would want you to get the entitlements first.
Okay, but I've seen two situations that go exactly to what you're asking. The first is, if you are acquiring large acreage, let's say you're acquiring a couple thousand acres, doesn't happen in South Florida these days, by the way, certainly still happening in other parts of the state, then you may acquire it because you've got a 20-year development plan. The more common scenario is, and this is, I think, a key for people who are going to play this game in South Florida, I'm seeing redevelopment happening. Say, for example, we take a suburban shopping center, 30 acres, it's got a sea of parking. You see this happening, particularly Plantation, by the way. The City of Plantation is doing a phenomenal job of turning old shopping centers into mixed-use developments. In that case, they are buying the dirt, but they're buying it because they know, they underwrite it based upon the operating income coming out of the existing shopping center, or what they think they could get just from that. And they also know that local governments today are so anxious to get mixed-use development and to turn these old strip centers into something more contemporary, that your entitlement risk is much lower.
It is a moving subject, but a slow-moving subject. Okay. Home building.
By entitlement risk, what do you mean?
That you buy a shopping center
Okay.
or vacant land, and today I can put 6 houses on it. Or take the golf course I'm going to show you. The golf course, which is 85 acres, when my clients, the day that ZOM walked in to not take the entitlement risk, theirs were subject to getting entitlements. All you could do was do a golf course on that 85 acres. ZOM wanted to do 900 residential units. They were unwilling to risk the land use planning process, the rezoning and everything, so they didn't have to close on the dirt until we had land use and zoning in place.
Thank you.
Now, just to digress a little bit, but it's not really a little digression. And here there's where you are in the industry and where you set your mind to on a given day. There is a growing faction in the real estate industry, particularly in retail and residential, in what the effect autonomous cars are going to have. It isn't the subject about talking about some far-flung thing in the future. It's coming at us like a locomotive right now. And so when you let your mind think about it, and let's say a big shopping centers, the autonomous car people, including Tesla and GM and Honda and Toyota and everybody else, are saying that people are not going to go to the shopping center in the same manner, in the same way they used to. They're probably going to just call up an autonomous driverless car, take them to the shopping center, and then leave, and then when they want to go home. So the question a lot of the real serious people in that side of the real estate industry now are finally facing up to is, what are we going to do with all these big parking lots that we may not need in the future, and what other uses are they for? So, I mean, this could have a major impact on land use in a lot of mature places like Broward County. Okay, the sector of home building, you have market research, you know, we talked about that. What do you build? What are we going to build? Why are we building it? And so forth. There's the land acquisition process that comes with home building. You either buy raw land, if you're a home builder, and you do it all yourself, or you wait for a developer to get the lots all the way to what we call turnkey, where the developer goes in and actually can pull a housing permit the next day. The developer goes home, sells the lot, makes a profit hopefully, and then the builder picks up.
Quick question.
What are you seeing today? I'm sorry.
During the break, a couple of us think we were just talking about that. So for someone beginning a development, like their first project, right? You would probably suggest maybe a good idea would be to get a turnkey they can already make sure that
If
you have what
if
you
you're
want
a
in
new
house.
home builder
Okay.
and you're just starting out, that's rough enough. For you to be taking on land development also is way too much. You're not ready for it.
Okay.
If you can buy a turnkey lot, buy 5 lots, 10 lots, make the numbers work and build 5 or 10 houses, that's the best thing you can do. That's the best way to get started. And let somebody else take all the risks and everything. Now, you're gonna have to pay for that
Yeah,
risk
I know,
that
we
the
were talking,
developer
you,
took.
you're gonna pay a premium for it a little bit, but at least
No, I was
you,
gonna say, your margins will be much lower.
Yeah.
but you know what you're getting into at least. You
Yeah.
don't have to risk your initial, like 300,000 you're looking at here.
Yeah, and if you got all the permits and they come with the land and everything, getting a housing permit to build, you just gotta get your housing plans approved. So, it's a whole different world.
The other interesting spin on this, which again, something that we're seeing now, there's a number of, there's some traditional shopping centers that are being built, strange enough. And they're bringing in folks like Aldi and Wawa and, who are kind of new to the South Florida marketplace. They are buying finished retail lots. The same model is being used in the retail industry, which is a big change in the business. And they deliver, and you know, they do a ground lease, and the developers are doing quite well with that. And the national retailers are more than happy to just have to worry about building their building.
Now, you remember this morning when we ran through quickly my bio, I was president of a company called Markborough Communities for 8 or 9 years, and at one point we were like the largest land developers in North America. And I had projects all over Canada and the United States. We were 95% land developers. We built turnkey lots, not only for home builders, but for commercial builders, industrial builders. The only time we built housing, and we did, is when the market was so bad that no one would buy our land. There was nobody, no builders were buying land, didn't have the money to buy land. To keep our land projects going, we risked home building ourselves just to keep turning land in that project. Even if we were breaking even losing some money, we didn't want to lose our market share and our market momentum. But that was the only time we ever built vertically. We were strictly horizontal developers. There were a lot of companies like us around in those days. Today, there's only a handful of what I would call major land developers. There's not many left. Most of the major home builders today, the Lennars and those guys, they are doing a lot of their own land development work now. They used to buy only turnkey lots. I mean, but those days, we've cycled out of that because of all the risk and capital you need to do land development. So anyway, under the home building, remember we talked about you take your due diligence till we get to the go, no-go decision. And that was based on, maybe the order of this is not right, but you certainly want to know what your financing model is. Does it look like I'm going to make a profit? You know, and then you set up, as a home builder, you set up all the marketing operations, sales, advertising, websites, and so forth. And of course, then you have construction, and you got to manage that and so forth. All of these are specialty areas themselves. I mean, here again, there are companies that actually do nothing but sell other builders, other condo developers' product. That's all they sell. They're like partners with them. So, office, retail, and industrial, I lump these all together because they're all kind of like the same in the processes that they go through. You have a choice of build to suit, which is somebody comes to you and says, I need a 1 million square foot warehouse, would you build it for me? I will sign a 20-year lease with you and I will guarantee and so forth. So as a developer, you build this building, this warehouse for somebody else. It's finished, it gets a permit. The owner of the building now pays you for the building and with a big profit, or you may hang around and actually manage the building for that person. So there's, you know, and then you could be in the business of owning industrial buildings and commercial buildings, and you want to not only build them, but you want to own them for your own account. Yes,
So here's an interesting facet I learned when I came to the Florida market. There's also this kind of a niche product, like flying under the radar. It's corporate real estate. Like if you have actually large companies that are actually running their own real estate development division inside.
I'm going to get to that.
All right, good. Because in terms of career development.
It's a very big story.
All right, fine.
Okay. But it's a good story. So you can be involved here again with some of the other architectural, but here's that big word, entitlement. Construction, you do it yourself or you hire somebody else to build it. Because there's the rent up, somebody's got to rent it all up and get tenants. And then of course, they all require major asset management. Asset management is a major segmentation of the real estate industry. Big time, yep.
Is that different than property management?
Same. Yeah.
Except, well, not in the
really,
hospitality
no.
area.
Yeah.
That's what we, yeah, I was gonna bring that up.
She told that hotel management is a whole other industry, and property management for homeowners associations and condominium associations is different. What I'm talking about here is managing skyscrapers, rental communities, shopping centers, and so forth. They take ongoing management every day. And now, another development, another segment of our industry has appeared in the last 3 or 4 years that's not in here, is the money invested by major equity funds in buying single-family houses to rent. We now have equity funds in the United States that own hundreds of thousands of homes. And they rent them out to people like us, and they need a major asset management support, and they have built a major asset management support. Rental single-family housing and townhousing in the United States now is about 7 to 8% of all residencies are owned and then leased to users. They're owned by investors. So the number's growing at a steady pace, and we think that it's going to become a permanent part of the real estate structure going forward, that a significant part or a measurable part of residential will be owned by investment equity pools.
Do they have lower returns than that of, say, would they have, do single-family rentals, they have maybe lower returns than of apartment buildings?
Not the people I know.
No?
They don't do deals if it doesn't meet their yield criteria.
Right, okay.
Tony, have you seen any hedge funds that actually have built like a single-family development? Because I've heard that they were going to start doing that because it's almost where they can buy the land.
Yeah, there's a few around. There's some projects out in other states. I haven't seen any in Florida. That means they're not here. Some land development guys have actually bought a couple of 100 acres and created a rental homeowners association community. And every house in that community is a rental, not an ownership. But I thought that was going to get bigger, but it didn't. That doesn't mean it's not going to happen.
What I'm seeing actually is more and more rental townhouse communities, which is relatively new also. In the back of my mind, I always see that those were built waiting for the for sale market to come back a little bit again, but I'm seeing a lot of rental townhouse, which is kind of interesting.
Is that because the land is so expensive, so they go high instead of going wide?
Actually, I think it's because
Because Houston is like that. If you go to Texas and stuff, most of them are going higher.
Houston has no zoning.
But still, like they go up. Like when you see the homes they're built, like the first floor is like the living room, the second floor is the room, the third floor is the kitchen, for example.
Yeah, that product's been around a long time.
Yeah, I think that seeing more and more townhouses is that, number one, people have realized they can actually raise children in a townhouse. What a miraculous idea. You don't have to live in a single-family home to raise a family in South Florida any longer. And that there are areas where you could do single-family, but you could get more density, more units, better returns if you go to a townhome product.
I mean, years ago, I built in Scottsdale, Arizona, I built condominiums. I built a flat apartment with 2 stacked townhouses on top of the apartment. Some would call them triplexes, sixplexes. So you had a 1-floor condo apartment, and then 1 flight up was a 2-story townhouse. And we stacked 2 of those on top of 1 apartment. So that product's been around quite a while.
The one thing this doesn't also reflect is mixed use. And I'm having a very interesting experience. I represent a number of national home builders, and they are now coming into a more urban marketplace. Their homes are now multifamily or townhomes, and in the urban setting, they're required to have a commercial component. National Home Builder doesn't know the first thing about commercial development. They are like one's speaking Greek, the other's speaking Chinese. And I had one of them just recently come to me and say, do you have a entrepreneurial commercial developer? Because they don't want a big commercial, they want somebody they can just do a deal with, and do a quick deal with, because they got enough burdens with the residential side. Do you have a commercial developer, entrepreneur locally that you can start partnering with? And just introduce them. By the way, as a business matter, business development, that's a twofer for me. But it also is that way the residential developer is not going into an area that they don't understand. And you know, this is one situation where you really should stay in your comfort zone. You know, if you decide that you're just going to do commercial, don't start trying to do a residential development, because you'll lose your shirt. They are very different dynamics and projects.
Well, that's why, coming back to this, that's why market research is so important. That you actually come to a comfort position that you're buying. Look, the business we're in is an oversimplification of the business we're in. Is we're really in the marketing business, no matter what we do. And why are we in the marketing business? Because what we do, if we do it right, we identify needs in the marketplace and we fill those needs. And we're filling them with residential housing, or we're filling them with office buildings, or we're filling, but the need has to exist in the first place. Otherwise, it's what we call a field of dreams. I don't know if you remember the movie Field of Dreams. He builds a ballpark in the middle of a cornfield, and somebody said, will they come? And so the question is, just building something like that Debbie's talking about. You know, will they come? Does anybody need what you're building? So it's really important that you find a comfort zone that, yes, I'm filling a need in the marketplace. It's really a very critical aspect. Capital markets. We touched a little bit about this morning. I just listed here, and I don't even, probably could change a lot of this today. This was 3 years ago. These are all of the different places you can go for money. Look, wow, there must be a lot of money. Well, there is a lot of money. Actually, there's about $3 or $4 trillion sitting on the sidelines just on Wall Street. That doesn't mean they're ready to lend it to you. Loan approvals today are really, really tough. But there's large commercial banks, there's regional and local banks, there's investment bankers, public and private equity funds, hedge funds, opportunity funds, family office, which is private money, insurance companies, pension funds, federal and state subsidy financing, tax incremental funds, TIFs, community development districts, public traded bonds, public partnerships, and public companies' equity capital. So they all are looking for a place to put their money, but they all have their own lending criteria and so forth. This is a whole career. I mean, people who marry money to projects probably are the most successful people in the real estate industry on the long run, because they don't have anything at risk, and what they're getting paid for, and handsomely, is putting money together with projects. And it's a huge industry, and it involves very, very big numbers. want to comment on that, or, I mean, it's...
Well, I was just gonna say, you could do a course on each one of these bullets. In my world, I deal with all the financial institutions, et cetera, et cetera. The items here, the TIF funding, which is probably gonna go away in the near future because that emanates from community redevelopment agencies, and the state of Florida has declared war on CRAs. I could teach a course on that. CDDs are, quite frankly, a financing tool they were designed to help large-scale developments. The first CDD in the state of Florida actually was what is today the city of Weston. And if any of you live in Weston, when you get your tax bill, you see there is the Indian Trace Community Development District. That is the water, sewer, and drainage system that was put in place for that, what became the city of Weston. The city, when the city was formed, by the way, the city commission took over the financial obligations of the CDD and basically absorbed those. That's yet another financing tool. The public partnerships, which are affectionately referred to as P3s, if you don't have a session on that and you want one, I got the perfect person who can teach you. Kim Griesmeister, actually.
Back just for a moment to the CDD. When the industry imploded in 2008 and 9, these went away. Some of them got into financial trouble. Some of the bondholders didn't get their money because the projects went into default and a whole bunch of things.
Excuse me, Tony. I think the ones that hadn't been built, but the CDD was.
Right.
And
they had borrowed money.
They had issued bonds, they had borrowed money, but the development hadn't got built. Those are the ones that really ran into trouble.
There was no way to pay back those bondholders. The money to pay off those bonds comes from the homes, the homeowners. It's added to your tax bill. Now, it's come back. The CDD bond market is alive and well right now. It's not used as much as it used to. But I think the most interesting one today is Villages. Now, the Villages is the largest retirement community in the world. It's north of Orlando. It has 75,000 homes. It has 39 golf courses. And it's an unbelievable place. They build 3,000 houses a year. And they've done it all with bonds. They have the Villages is broken down now into 5 districts.
But you can only finance public infrastructure. So you can do roads, water, sewer, parks, schools, public landscaped areas.
Mostly horizontal assets.
It has to be, pretty much.
Is it tax incremental funds? Is it a government agency?
Community development districts.
No, the tax incremental.
The tax increment funds is actually, TIF financing is the financing mechanism used by community redevelopment agencies. So the CRA is the governmental entity. They get tax increment financing. Do you guys know what TIF is? No. Okay. Let me explain that because it's actually an interesting tool. When a community redevelopment agency is created, the government sets the base of the assessed value of the district. Let's say you have 100 acres and its assessed value is $1 million. Crazy, just easy number. When the first redevelopment project comes in, after the CRA has been established, now you've got a big new office building. That office building adds $500,000 to the assessed value within the district. The taxes that flow to the local government from that $500,000 is the tax increment. The CRA can then use that increment to finance other improvements within the district, or, and I have actually done this in Hollywood, Fort Lauderdale, Deerfield, means Pompano, cities all over Broward County have used their tax increment financing tool to actually incentivize redevelopment, so that we have a project comes into, I'll give you my favorite one, in Hollywood Station. which is at the corner of Dixie and Hollywood Boulevard. We got a tax increment there of, when the project first went on the tax rolls, the developer got a refund. Florida's not allowed to do tax abatement. So when the project came on the tax rolls, 50% of the taxes that came to the CRA for the first 10 years of the project were paid back to the developer. It's kind of a way of getting around Florida's constitutional prohibition against tax abatement. So that's tax income financing in a nutshell.
Instead of that money going into the general funds of the taxpayers, it stays out of the tax funds, out of the general, and it stays in the CRA so the CRA can reinvest that money. So you think they're all going to go away?
Well,
the methodology is going to go away?
No, I think that the CRAs that exist today in the state are going to live out their lives, and they all have a statutorily prescribed life. Most of them are about 25 years. And the legislature is slowly but surely whittling away at the ability to do CRAs.
They don't want this money going sideways like this. Now in California...
Well, it's not sideways, Tony. I mean, I think it's been used...
No, I mean, but instead of
Yeah.
the money going to the general funds, it's staying out in the CRA. In California, they outlawed all CRAs and dissolved them all in one night. And billions rolled into the state of California that was supposed to go to the CRAs.
So since the money is some of the money going to the developer, when the project is completed, do they make it affordable at all?
Do they what?
Do they make it affordable?
Affordable. No.
No, it has no effect on
reason,
that.
no, the reason that a developer, the reason that a CRA would give an incentive to a developer is because redevelopment areas need, at the beginning of their lives in particular, they need to help offset the risk of going into that neighborhood. Give you a perfect example. In Fort Lauderdale, if any of you have been to Flagler Village?
Yes.
In Flagler Village, the first development that came in there was the Soleil? Soleil got a tax increment. The second one, I can't remember which one, they got a tax increment. You come in there today, you don't get any tax increment. Because there's no more risk. It's one of the most successful residential redevelopment areas that I've ever seen. I've also been involved with it since 1989, so it's really kind of exciting. There's also a new brewery there that's really good if anybody hasn't been to. And we give all sorts of information in this line, but it's called invasive species. It's great. Yeah.
So is it true that the community development districts are in first lien position in front of the banks that loaned the money for all those developments?
The CDDs?
Yes.
It depends.
It depends.
Because like Codina did that deal on University Drive. He bought the CDD because he got in the first lien position to foreclose the bank.
Okay, so let me tell you something. When during the recession, we were doing those kinds of analyses for clients who were hedge funds, had no place else. They were coming to us from New York and saying, you know, we got these CDD, this is CDD. Is there a route for me to get title? And there is. There is a route. I mean, there was then. I don't know if you could do it today. But there was a route then, given the way the CDDs were set up, that you could do exactly what Codina did and end up with title by foreclosing the CDD bonds. Absolutely. But it really depends upon a lot of the way it was structured and how it was set up from the beginning.
I know the banks weren't real happy about it.
Well, you know, nobody was happy in those days, including me, so.
Okay. Then you have all our friends, the consultants, okay? And that seems to be the longest list of the night, right? There are, now, why do I say this to you? Because you, with an MSRED, could become a consultant in almost any one of these categories and make a very damn good living. Because why are all these consultants? I mean, I'm not going to go over every list unless I'll talk about any one you want. A developer, a focused, sophisticated developer whether it's a horizontal developer or a vertical developer, wants to eliminate permanent overheads as fast and as sure as he can. Because those permanent overheads work against them when they make loans presentations. When they have to admit, it costs me this much money to run my company, and it costs me this much. Well, that whacks how much money somebody's willing to lend you. So the industry historically has looked to, instead of hiring all these people in-house and keeping them on the payroll, many of these different fields are hired for what they need and then are fired when they're finished. So yes, they're maybe expensive, maybe, but the point is you're only paying them for the day you need them to the day you don't need them anymore, and they're not on your books. You're not paying their taxes. You're not, you don't have all the human problems. You don't have the human resource problems. So key is to work these numbers into your projects and not a huge overhead figure that if you wanted to keep these people in-house. Now, some developers do keep some of these people in-house. Some of the bigger developers have attorneys in-house. They might not do what Debbie does, but they handle a lot of the corporate legal stuff and everything. But if you go down this list, most of these are outside, arm's length, third-party relationships. But as I said, you can make a living and you can find work in any one of these fields. You know what, Thomas? I didn't have it. I left that page up, but you made a good point before. One other place you might think about, in addition to working in all those capital marketplaces and everything, some of the biggest real estate operations in our country, maybe in the world, or around the world, are the real estate departments in big corporations. I mean, we don't think about it, but when if you take General Motors or you take Toyota, and you think about all their factories and the size of their factories and how much real estate's involved, and the shopping center guys and I can go on, the retail guys, and they have big real estate corporate divisions and departments. I mean, huge. Insurance companies have big real estate departments. Commercial banks, big real. If you go to Goldman Sachs, you'll be shocked at how many people work purely in real estate. But they're not listed anywhere as a developer anywhere or a builder anywhere, but they are in the heart of real estate. And so when you're also thinking about career and everything, don't just eliminate those people. I'm going to tell you, if you worked in Goldman Sachs real estate department, you're making terrific money today and always have. They pay well, the banks pay well, they all, but so that's it, as you accumulate what we asked you to do this morning, knowledge through new, knowledge through mistakes, knowledge through that, the more you have to offer, the more those people will come looking for you.
And there are great places to start an internship. I just got this week an email from a former student of our program. Well, technically he was an MBA student taking my classes, but he got into the real estate division of Publix. They actually have a high-end internship program. You really have to compete to get in there. It's not just like send your resume in.
Yeah.
So go to recommendation letter and kid coming.
I would suggest there's more jobs in those venues than there are in the pure development. Yeah.
What's like a typical, I guess, asset that, say, an insurance company would own? Because they're different than a GMC that has actual physical.
They make major loans.
So the portfolios.
They invest in apartment complexes. They invest in shopping centers.
They typically don't buy raw dirt.
Yeah.
They'll be a takeout kind of lender. They'll come in, property stabilized, they're kind of like a REE. They approach the world like a REE. They want recurring revenue income coming in.
Triple net.
They're gonna go to a you know, stabilized, ready to go project.
They invest your premiums. When you pay for your insurance premiums, they have to put that money to work and have to lend it. And just like when you make a bank deposit in a savings account, the bank has to put it out and make money with that money. So it's the same principle. Okay, was there another hand?
Can you go back one slide?
Yeah.
No, can you go back?
Oh, go back,
one
sure.
slide? All right, right there.
You're gonna get it. You'll be able to make a copy of it. I'm gonna send it to you.
Right, but as you're speaking.
You want it? Oh, okay. Is there
all
anything
is
you want to
jumping
talk
off the
about?
screen. No, as you're speaking, everything is jumping off the screen, so it's, I'm like.
I was just speaking, just live it there.
You what?
I was just speaking, just live it this slide, so that's what she's saying.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, what you said.
I'm missing both, I'm sorry.
Just keep this slide up for a while, Tony.
Oh, okay, all right.
I'm here to translate.
All right, no, okay, no, but she's got to make a presentation, so.
Right.
Okay, let's take a 5-minute break, and we'll leave this up, okay? And then we'll come back, and Debbie will pick up on the next part of the program. RJ.
So what the insurance companies do, they hire smart people like
GIS?
you
You
to
need to
underwrite
take
the deal.
Thomas' class.
And then like before they loan the money, you would be, instead of buying it, you're buying it in a weird way.
Yeah.
You would underwrite it.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, those guys.
Really?
So
Ready to go into business?
unbelievable. You just gotta figure out where you fit, and you're young,
Is this helping you think?
Insurance company,
Yeah.
they have all the money.
Yeah.
In the recession, you didn't hear any insurance company go belly up.
I told you.
In this recession, in this.
The industry is so.
They didn't go belly up?
No, all the banks got killed, Lehman
There's
Brothers
so
got
many
killed, but
different
no
ways
insurance
to
company.
go and do it.
It's because they
You mean,
were
get on the
not
train.
leveraged in the.
Go for the ride, whoever it takes you.
They weren't building stupid
That's the
buildings.
nature of
Right.
real
Lehman
estate.
Brothers was 122 years old. They started doing
You know, if
crap
you
that they, just
go to
because you
law
know a lot about
school to be an
stocks and
attorney, well, you're gonna be an
investments
attorney.
doesn't mean you know anything about real estate.
Even though you specialize.
So, and
If you
we
go to,
heard the guys this morning.
become an accountant,
They
become a
don't know nothing about
CPA,
the
that's
stock
what you're
market.
gonna
My old partners,
Yeah.
Real
they
estate,
didn't know it
there's
because
so
you only
many
have so much
different things you
capacity.
can do.
Yeah.
And the stock market is like playing gambling.
Yeah, well, you don't know
Well,
where
so
one's
is
gonna
land,
look.
but in a different way.
I mean, I look
And they
at
don't
my
like
own
to clutter their
career.
lives with
I
putting
mean,
their
I went to
assets in the stock market.
accounting,
They don't
my
trust
undergraduate
it.
degree
When
in
it drops
marketing
down,
and finance with
20%
graduate school.
one day,
And
land,
working
besides for the
in
recession, never does.
consumer products in
Usually
the
goes
middle
the
of
other way.
and
I mean, that's one of the reasons why I chose real
3
estate.
years
and
later,
finance
I'm
instead
president
of
of the
stock.
development.
No, I have a
market
finance
stuff.
and marketing degree, but what he said about land.
Who
or
knew?
real estate
You know, I
companies,
mean,
it's
then
all
that
about
had to
the
go
end
away, and I
result.
became a
Yeah.
home
So that's
builder, and
marketing.
that went away.
So when I went into
Then I
my
became a
finance degree, I wanted to do
banker, and that went
something
away,
else.
and then I
That's what
became
I do. I wanted to
a
automate
major
my
monster
marketing degree, so I
developer,
could
and
finance,
then
which was
I
the hard part.
decided,
Yeah,
no more.
But now that I'm in the real
That's
estate
when I
business,
went to my
office,
second life.
So you have a finance
And I
degree.
turned myself into a consultant.
You're like, my son's.
I didn't want to do the
Yes.
corporate stuff anymore.
That's half the battle.
Yeah.
So
You gotta put on
I'm
your
very
marketing
fortunate
hat.
to have
Yeah.
But you guys here
two
today,
full careers. Lived long enough, healthy enough, and everything to have.
What do you think's a better starting place?
But
Like
I
a
could
big
never have
insurance
done a
company like
second
that, or
Depends on your interest.
without accumulating all the knowledge and
Chris is going to
that's the important thing. I mean, you can't be one of those consultants unless you're
So
an
they're
expert. And I do expert witness work with lawyers in litigation. And I hire me as an expert witness in front of juries and judges and everything. I have to go through a major qualification every time to prove to the court that I'm an expert. You can't just go in and say, well, I'm an expert. The judge is going to say, oh, yeah? Prove it. And so I have to take in, and I have all the other cases that I've been involved in, I have to give all the detail. And then also all of the projects that I've done, all the other consulting I've done, and so forth. I had a case I was a consultant on, up in Fort Pierce.
so you gotta have
This opposing attorney was such a, I don't even want to use the word. They begins with an A, and ends in an E, okay? I mean, he was so dumb, and he was just driving the judge crazy. So finally, I came into, and they called me up and said, and he says, Your Honor, this man is not an expert.
So anyway, I seen his
So,
wheels.
he said, what do you mean? He says, I'm not satisfied that he's an expert. So the judge looked at me and said,
Really?
can you tell us why you're an expert? So I said, okay, so I did it, and I did this, and I did this. Finally, the judge said, stop. You're an expert. I don't want to hear anymore. I mean, he told the other one, sit down. He's an expert. Anyway, it's just one other thing you can do. When you have enough knowledge. The problem is, you're old, young, you're ambitious. So remember, you got to work harder than everybody else. Greg Perry works harder than everybody else. She works harder than everybody else. If you just want to be a mediocre 9 to 5, you're not getting anywhere. I mean, it takes a lot of hustle. I can see to excel now where this comes into my life. So you have to work hard. And just take a breather. Just let life take. Don't worry about it. If you don't like the job, quit. Don't you know? There's no big deal. I know it's easy for me to say. I think of how I stayed in jobs myself. Way past when I should have left. It was so stupid. It was insecurity. It was silent emotions. Or I'm gonna beat that boss I hate. I don't care what, you know. I'm worth it. The next day you quit, you feel free. You get your life back, which is okay. I mean, you know.
Are you trying to do more to the private equity?
But I deal with mentor a lot of these students. Some of them have too much ambition. They want to do things
so I don't necessarily.
And they're doomed to fail. They don't know. They don't know what they don't know. And I will mention this he had a bunch of money, possible family money, he went down in Venezuela, you try to get this money of yours, I'm going to start an investment company, I'm going to start a business.
Yeah.
You don't even know how to swing a hammer for crying out loud. What do you, you're going to take the responsibility of investing millions of dollars of other people's money? And you know nothing? I said, go to work somewhere and go learn. Then you can risk with other people's money, whatever you want. If it's your money, be a fool, I don't care. Be mad at your money.
Again, I don't know.
You can't do that with other have any effect. There's too much money in the market. There's too much money in the world. We printed, our government in Europe printed, and China printed too much money. And so it's just sitting in banks and it's not earning any money or 0.5% interest. I mean, to be meaningful, you need interest rates at 6, 7, 8%. Not going to go there. So, but that doesn't mean people are just throwing money at things. They are. I mean, the stock market is way overheated. And I mean, it goes down 400 points and they all panic and it comes back the next day up 500 points. Why? Because they've got nothing else to do with their money. They can go into the bond market, but it's a much smaller market than the stock market.
Our exit strategy.
You think about how many, if you were wealthy, how many places can you invest in?
Yeah.
But worst case scenario, he said it right there. You know, when never built houses when you had.
I mean, if you buy Forbes magazine every year, and every year they list wealthiest people, 400 wealthiest scenario when you buy a home. 10 years ago, there were about 10 or 20 millionaires.
Very risky.
Now all 400. There are people who are $2 billion that can't make the list. It's just crazy. You know, can't build houses for people. Can't afford to buy houses. You see how expensive it is to develop. None of those guys go to nobody's going to say, all right, I'll charge less.
It's already loaded.
So by the time the builder finishes the house, they sold out. He's got to sell a house for $600,000 to make a profit.
Right.
Oh, you know what it is?
No, this isn't the one I want. I need the one that was behind Tony.
Behind Tony's.
Yeah, actually, Tony, the rest of mine, where's the rest of mine?
Oh, I'm sorry. It's, 2 years. Go back to 80. Is this mine? Is mine?
Yeah. So this is just like
They were over there.
No, that's the one I want after, but the one Tony has.
They didn't know the market.
right.
First 8 weeks, summer.
That's what
Right.
It's a what?
It's funny, I did in one of my, like, I guess it wasn't a dissertation, it was like my final finance project. I got to sort of pick from topics, and one of mine was like the 18-year real estate.
No, this is not, no, that's
And I
what
wrote
you
about
tried
how I
to
think,
put.
yeah,
That's
absolutely,
Oh, okay.
it's a real thing, all this data, and I don't know necessarily.
Well, okay, Thomas, I can get it off my iPad.
We were almost there, but we were faster. You put these other little minor hiccups in the 80s and 90s, they were not because Florida,
So you're sending it to me?
I'm gonna.
Yeah.
you know what the difference is? You first, you first. What's the difference between population growth and dying? Yeah. When you stop growing, you die.
Yeah. No, that's right.
Because it's the exit.
I'm gonna send you another Dropbox link.
So it's just, I just call it death.
Death. Yes.
You don't want to wreck.
Okay, listen, everybody stand up. No, seriously, this is important.
It's called Palm Air.
All right, everybody jump up and down 10 times. Come on. Get the blood going, come on. Okay, come on. All right, you can sit down.
Hey, RJ, you know where that University Drive is? It's called Montera. It's right there on University Drive in Sterling Road.
Okay, I think I do,
It's a
yeah.
big development.
Yeah.
Dropbox.
Well, that was the CDE deal. What happened was the CDEs were in front of the banks.
What do you mean by that?
They were first lien positions.
Oh.
So the smart guy, this guy called Codina from Miami, bought the CDE.
While we're waiting for the presentation, let me give you the history of this site. They don't have visuals, but I'll.
Because the bondholders went.
So this is an 85 plus or minus acre former golf course located at the east of the Florida Turnpike, north of Atlantic. And are you guys familiar with Palm Air?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Palm Air is a development in Pompano Beach, for those of you who are not, that started being developed in the 1970s by a group of individuals out of Philadelphia and New Jersey, and I add that because they did the initial. It was thousands of acres, 5 golf courses, 10,000 units, totally unplanned, it was actually, if anything, it was planned and developed by a bunch of real estate brokers not planners, but they did something right because it was an enormously successful, to this day, is an enormously successful community. Condos, single-family homes, a little bit of high-rises, bunch of townhouses, again, built out, and there were 5 golf courses. I think only 2 or 3 of the golf courses are continuing to be in operation as golf courses. One of them became a lake, and it became a lake so that my clients could sell the rock in that lake, and Broward County built the new runway. Talk about adaptive reuse of property. That was a twofer for us. The client got to sell some rock. They also were able to say to the residences surrounding that golf course, please support our development north of Atlantic. If you support us, then we'll keep the golf course around you as open space for the next 30 years. We didn't really say that the open space was going to be a lake. They didn't care. They just wanted it open. They didn't want to see development of that golf course. How are we doing?
10 seconds.
Okay. So my original New Jersey, Philadelphia guys sell to a bunch of different folks. Sometime around 2000, they come back and acquire the golf courses, and this particular, the northern course, which was shut down as a golf course in 2003. It was an executive course. Nobody really, you'll see it in a moment. Not really pretty, hadn't been invested, nobody played golf in it. It had historically been established, the city of Pompano Beach. It was one of the Pompano Beach's well fields. It is still part of the Pompano Beach wellfield system. It has 5 active wellheads. Those wellheads had to be incorporated, protected, and incorporated into the land plan. You're going to see how all those pieces fit together. When the golf course was shut down in 2003, in the course of routine water sampling, the county and the city alerted the landowner, we have a hit for arsenic in the groundwater. It was never a public health hazard. It was never at the levels that you had to worry about. And through the course of the next 10 years, while we permitted what you're about to see, with the use of nature and a little bit of technology, they were able to clean up and have that property suitable for residential development. So around 2004, my guys come to me. This is Philadelphia. They come to me and they say, we want to develop 1,000 units up there. I won't take you through. This is kind of this tells you all about how wonderful Zom is. Okay, so here is the property, 85 acres. We have Turnpike, Atlantic. All of this is existing golf courses. This is actually a redevelopment area. It's part of the West CRA for the city of Pompano Beach. This is existing commercial, not part of us. This is that lovely golf court, mobile home park. This multifamily, which created a real issue, was developed by somebody else, owned by somebody else since the beginning of time. We don't know why it was sold off, but it ended up being something we had to design around. My clients actually tried to acquire it, but by the time they got there, it was owned by a REIT. The REIT was more than happy to collect the rents they were collecting and wanted nothing to do other than to say, don't screw around with our access way, but if you leave our access alone, we'll leave you alone, and that's what we ended up doing. So, and any questions you have, jump in. Keep in mind that I typically appear before 5, 7, or 9 individuals known as elected officials. They will ask me questions and pull me in 12 directions while I'm standing at a podium, and then I have to come back to what my sentence was trying to say. My brain still continues to do that. When it can't, it will be time to retire. So,
what was the Philadelphia-based company called?
Wasn't.
Ah.
A bunch of guys that owned a lot of dirt.
Ah.
And they were kind of old school landowners. They were not in it. They were not really developers. They were landowners. It sounds a little strange, but they held dirt to sell to others. So they come to me, say, what can we do there? We want to, this is, the first thing I had to do was evaluate what does the land use plan permit the city and the county, because in Broward County you got to worry about both. What does the land use plan permit us to do? As of the day we walked in 2004, it permitted me to have a cemetery, a well field, or a golf course. That was pretty much. I think we could also do an amusement park. It's commercial recreation, kind of a silly land use category if you want to do anything but operate a golf course. So we started to evaluate. They wanted 1,000 units. Now, why did they want 1,000 units? It was a nice round number. There was no marketing analysis that was done to this. They said, 1,000 units. Deb, get us 1,000 units. Okay. So we begin to analyze, and this is where I said a moment ago, you have to be strategic. You have to view the land development entitlement process as a marine obstacle course. That you come to the wall and you climb over the wall. You come to the lake, you get the rope, you swing across. And you got to figure out what your end game is and then go through the obstacle course, because that's what it is. And you could fall over at any point, and you got to figure out how you're going to get around it, go over it, or make it go away. So we went to the city, said to the city, we want to do 1,000 units there. It's interesting, this Palm Air, with an area that was probably about 2,000 acres at the day it started, was within what is in Broward County called a dashed line area. The dashed line area that was put in as a land use matter, it takes this 2,000 acres, it draws a big line around it with a dash, and it puts a number in the middle. In this case, that number said you could build 10,683 units anywhere you want in this 2,000 acres. That was established in 1979. We come to 2004, and interestingly, at the city, that number had been reduced to 9,700 and something. At the county, it was still the larger number. The differential was 907 units, which in my world was close enough to 1,000. Or said to the client, you can get 907 units there. What do you say? Without having to amend the Broward County land use plan. We ended up having to change the county plan for other reasons. But we weren't having a net increase in density. Client said, fine, I'll take 907. To me, it's kind of the same as 1,000. I have nothing today. If I have 907, let's see where it goes. We then start what becomes a 4-year odyssey to get nowhere. Get nowhere because Broward County had decided that they were going to, in fact it was then County Commissioner Ken Keachel. I often see Ken and say to him, you wasted 4 years of our life, but we ended up in a good place. Ken was actually on the county commission, and he was fighting the conversion of the American golf course over in Coral Ridge, which Terry Stiles was actually involved in. He was trying to oppose that, and the mechanism to oppose that was to put into the Broward County land use plan special requirements for the conversion of golf courses. That if you were going to convert a golf course, they put in special policies that required you to jump through other hoops, that included showing how you were going to meet the recreational needs of the community, and that you were going to do a phase 2 environmental assessment. Have you guys talked about environmentals? Does everybody know what that is? We got to give you a separate course.
Did I miss it? Was it a private or public golf course?
It was privately owned, open to the general public.
Okay.
So it took, during the course of this 04 to 08 period, Broward County's putting in place these new regulations, and all these golf courses are coming up in part because we are becoming a built-out community. And therefore, we're now looking, where is there underutilized dirt? And golf courses is great underutilized dirt. They come with a burden. That being, they typically have arsenic contamination, which is a result of, actually, this is going to scare you, but until 2010, it was not illegal to use the fertilizer that had arsenic in it. And even though we knew long before then that it shouldn't be. And most golf courses, quite frankly, that were being properly managed had stopped. It had gone to new non-arsenic containing products, but it was still out there. So come to 2008, the policies are in place. We're figuring out how we're going to meet them as to this parcel. We can do this. The city had said, we want a park. We want a park right there, which started out at 10 acres and grew to 12 acres by the time we finished with our entitlements in 2010. So we were able to meet the county's comp planning requirements. And what happens in 2008? The Great Recession. So my guys from Philadelphia couldn't give away this property until 2010, maybe 09. 09, 2010, it took about a year or so. ZOM comes to the table and says, we need dirt. They are ZOM is a national developer. They do a lot of different types of product today, including what we would call today workforce housing. They are mostly a rental developer. They really don't do much for sale product. They put all of this property under contract. We start doing the master planning process, working with the city. And
is it working?
Yeah. And graphic, we had to do the land use plan amendment at the same time as a rezoning. And we had to build in a rezoning that allowed for product flexibility and for phased development. So there's a tool called a PUD, Planned Unit Development. The city of Pompano Beach calls theirs an RPUD, Residential Planned Unit Development. And it allows you to create pods and standards and then develop each piece as it goes down, as you progress.
Is there any access to the southwest area right there? I'm just curious.
The only thing that's here?
Yeah,
This is the turnpike, so there's nothing going here.
Yeah, I was just thinking a little circle. I'm assuming that's a cul-de-sac. So
That?
if you live on that cul-de-sac,
It's a well field.
Oh, well field.
It's a wellhead. We're going to get to that.
Oh, sorry.
But no, if you, only circulation, the only way to enter and exit this site is here. This is the main entrance, and then here. There's a road that goes here and comes out to 31st Avenue. Now, this is actually a story in itself, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about that. Let me just walk you through the master plan. So you can see the parcels that were designed. What you're going to see at the end of the show, which is the separate presentation, is that this ended up to be developed by 3 different developers. ZOM builds 400-something rental units through here. We'll show you that in a moment. Florida Crystal, sugar company that does development because they got a lot of money. They got to figure out what to do with it too. Florida Crystal did a rental development here, and small home builder doing for sale product right through there, 0 lots and single family. The RPUD allowed for that to happen. It is a flexible tool. And one of the things that both from your land planner and your land use lawyer need to come up with is they need to understand your development objectives, so they give you a regulatory framework that allows you to sell and develop the way you want to do it.
So quick question, the rental product, the townhouses or the
units that are rental product by zone. They were just, I mean, it's literally just rental product.
Yes, but that's what they do for a living.
Right, but they were able to just, because of the PUD, mix it with everything.
Well, this entire parcel is their 400, I'll tell you.
So they technically owned that whole parcel. It was kind of divided?
They owned and developed this entire parcel, 16 individual buildings. The total build-out is a development called Luzano, and it has 404 rental units. By the way, they got approved in that parcel for 600. But at the end of the day, the maximum density they could accommodate was 400. So one of the things you have to do when you're underwriting this is know, can I really fit 10 pounds in that 5-pound bag? But you can't always do it. They needed, you'll see this is an amenitized rental community, and those amenities require a lot of dirt.
Does the approval time take long?
We'll get to that. Remember, I started this project in 2004. We didn't break that ground until 15.
So
Yeah.
is it true that if it's like under certain square feet, like 10,000 square feet, you don't need to have parking lots and stuff for the development of?
I can't answer that question for you. You'd have to speak to an architect. Seriously. Yeah.
So you said, yeah, there's two entrances, but the main one's one on Atlantic, right?
Yes.
And so do they share that entrance for everything?
Yes.
One gate for everything, or each, for example, the Zomo
Actually,
extra gate?
we were required, because the city insisted inappropriately that it be a unified development. There is a connection here, there is a connection here, and then everybody feeds into this main road. Now, interestingly, if you live in this development, you come and go through somebody else's. So the entire 85 acres is all a unified development, but if you're the general public, the only way you're going to get in is right here. This is, this road here to 31st is residents only.
And the amenities that are there with the clubhouse are available for everybody?
No. If
Just
you
for
live
the
here, you can use these amenities. If you live here, you use whatever they got, and the same thing. Each development, the only thing they share is access. Now, let's
But
talk.
to come back to RJ's question, the southwest corner, which is like pretty much the purple line and then the purple dot, that is pretty much the dead end of your single-family homes.
Correct.
So that's a long driveway from there to the gate. So I wasn't sure if this is the pipe diagram or for like water main, or is that really the roads?
It's both, actually.
Both, because I only see the purple lines right now.
The purple lines are, I don't remember what the.
These ones, you don't have to worry
I
about
should have
traffic.
printed this. I can't read what it is. You might be able to read it on your computer screen, Thomas.
Who maintains the entrance?
This,
The shared entrance?
they share it.
Who? No, the one.
It's
oh,
whole building, I mean,
This one,
Yep. Nope, the other one.
this one,
Yep.
that is actually, they get a contribution from the other developments. Because we put CCRs in place, and there isn't a master association, but there are CCRs that put burdens. CCRs are conditions, covenants, and restrictions. And we put those in place that allow this, remember, this is not an ownership. ZOM owns this, so they just charge these properties for whatever their share of those pieces. So let's talk a little bit about some of the real challenges here. First of all, we talked about access as being a challenge. Getting a secondary access, this is 31st Avenue, just as an aside, if you go north on 31st, that's the way you get onto the northbound lanes of the turnpike. At Atlantic, you can't get on the northbound lanes. You can get off the turnpike from the north, but you can't get on if you're heading north. You have to go to 31st. So it was really important to this development and to the traffic pattern that we figure out access to 31st. At the time that this was done, the city owned, the city had a half a road here. This piece right here was owned by others, and there was a road right here. There's this guy, Harry Hurley. Harry is a character. And owns restaurants, owns land, owns dirt. Everybody's trying to negotiate with Harry to buy his property, and he's not selling because he sees that ZOM is coming through and his property values are going to go up, and he's just going to sit tight. So I said, can I take a run at Harry? I got an idea. Harry, right now you have half a road that's owned by the city because it's accessing their utility. They had to get utility vehicles to access the well fields. And it splits your property right in half. What if we moved that access? You need to swap so that your parcels, and he owned a parcel like this, divided by a road owned by somebody else, and a parcel like this, you get a consolidated parcel and you get a really new spanking road on the north end of your newly configured property to go to 31st. And Harry said, I could do that. I like that idea.
Did the city agree on that?
Okay, the city had given up talking to Harry. They sent me to Harry. So, part of what happened here was A, Harry got a win, the city got a win, and my client got a win. It was a three-fer. It was amazing. And this was actually one of the most rewarding experiences I've had in doing an entitlement project, because on top of that, this is a park, right? This is, by the way, it's, at the time, the district commissioner in Pompano was George Brummer. Love George. George thankfully retired at 86. He should have retired a little earlier. But George thought that the neighborhood needed a football field there. That's what they needed. The neighborhood to the east, the redeveloping neighborhood, needed a football field. The neighborhood said, George, we want an active community center. We want soccer fields, we want community stuff, we want a place we can really have a park. We don't want it all to be just a football field. But you need a football field. No, George, we don't want a football field. George was going at it. So, had to go to George. George, the neighborhood leadership was this guy Vincent. Put George and Vincent in a room together. Finally got them talking, not at cross purposes. And George backed off because he finally heard what the neighborhood was saying. At the hearing where this swap was implemented, the neighborhood came out in full force to support our development. And at the end of the hearing, I got a hug from Vincent, and I was in heaven, because it was truly addressing a community need that the city hadn't heard, and they got a voice. I'm sharing this in part because, remember, in this business, you're dealing with people's backyards and their day-to-day lives. We build communities, and you have got to be a great listener and a good communicator. You got to be the person who can get Harry Hurley to the table and know that Vincent and his folks have a different agenda than their elected official who doesn't hear them, because he's stuck in a different mentality. It's really a very interesting dynamic. So, come back to the project. We now have access to 31st. We got a park the neighborhood to the east likes. We got well fields. Let me take us down a little bit. When we were running, this is a wellhead. It's got landscaping around it. You can't get to it from anything. There were specific Broward County environmental requirements as to the distance between a wellhead and various other things, including driveways, parking lots, swimming pools. So the designers, the land planners, had to work really closely with the environmental professionals to make sure that you met all these environmental requirements at the same time that you were meeting the design requirements for a good development. It was an amazing merger to watch the cross disciplines working together. And sometimes they butted heads, but quite frankly, the regulation wins when you're talking about a public water supply. So, on top of that,
Is a wellhead just access to the water supply? Is that?
The wellhead is, yes, it's a testing location, and they have to clean out the pipes. Okay, so there's this thing called pigging it. You also learn about really weird stuff, but pigging it, they have this thing that every once in a while, in order to test a public water line, they put this pig through it, they call it the pig, and it's got a camera in it, and they basically shoot it through a line and take a picture to see if there's any problems in the line, and this and that. So they needed to be able to flush the lines, which sends thousands of gallons of water into the surrounding area. So this area, the drainage system, had to be designed to accept the flushing of that system on a monthly or quarterly basis.
But all of that area has fire hydrants as well. So the fire
This has nothing to do with fire hydrants.
But what I'm saying about flushing, fire hydrants need to have at least an annual flushing as well for the maintenance programs. So they're doing that in the night where you will barely not see it, but I guess the gallon amount is different.
It's completely different, and this is raw water.
And the smell
From the aquifer.
Right.
This is raw water versus treated, which is what would come out of those fire hydrants. So, yes, and the volume is significantly different.
Is there any special flood risk or insurance risk being near something like that?
No.
Do you have to worry about no?
No, that was not an issue that came up at all. So, ZOM knew what they wanted to do with phase one. They knew, so we processed the phase one site plan, which is what's in front of you, at the same time that we were processing the rezoning. That's a bit of a challenge in a PUD because they're designing the site plan based upon regulations that you're in the process of writing and having enacted. So it's a little bit of a juggling lesson, but ZOM ends up with, this is their main entrance, they've got their clubhouse, you'll see pictures of this in a moment, 16 buildings that allowed them to, this road had to be finished before they could go beyond a certain number of COs in the development, which we actually got the city to extend at some point and allow us to do other things because we got delayed on the road because bumps in the road, building the road. There was an engineering issue and the road would have ended up not meeting on either side of one of the access points. Crazy things happen. So you have to stay in dialogue.
Question. How did ZOM take into account, the surrounding businesses that are pretty close to the area, that are maybe not family friendly?
There's the cheetah. Are you talking about the cheetah? I always, yeah. So for those of you who don't know what we're talking
The
about.
cheetah's up the road there.
Right about, I guess it's right about here, actually, on 30, this is 31st, it's just north of,
I'm asking because it's a real, maybe something families wouldn't want to move into an area where that's there.
This leased up, they couldn't CO the units quick enough to satisfy their leasing demand.
For those who are new to class, CO is short for certification of occupancy. It's literally like a little piece of paper that allows you to move in people into your buildings.
So basically something that they didn't matter.
No, the whole area was challenged, to be honest with you. I mean, if you look at this, if you go back to the aerial, we've got a mobile home park here, so they buffered against that. We've got not very attractive multifamily, and you'll see in the master plan in a moment, we put lots of lakes here and here. We knew this would be the most undesirable portion because it backs up to the turnpike. Over here, this is changing actually because of all the residences coming in. I think this commercial may actually get an upgrade. This is not a great, the surrounding area wasn't great. They internalized everything. And you'll see that in a moment. It's a beautiful development.
Habitat builds in that whole area to the right where it says single family. I just built a bunch of houses on the right of that little, because so that is a little distressed area there.
Yeah, well, it's their Western CRA, and it's got challenges, but it too is getting better.
I don't know exactly what it is.
But is that better than the area in just east of 95?
I got to tell you, just so everybody knows, and I don't really care because it's public now, but all the small builders are buying up all these inexpensive lots all over the county in the worst areas, and they're paying premiums because there's no land left. And it's hurting us tremendously.
Yeah.
Well, you know, this is a good time to inject that one more play on the fact that Broward County has no large tracts of land left. When we look at Broward County, well, what's its future? Well, its future is redevelopment. I mean, this is very common in real estate development history that places grow and expand through redevelopment, decline, redevelop. This is an infill project.
That's right.
And I would suggest to you that if you want to stay in Broward County in real estate and in new construction, you're going to be spending the rest of your life in infill and redevelopment projects.
Absolutely. So, let's see if there's any other elements here we can go through. This was, again, let me go back to one other thing though. If you look at this, see how the lake system here, this was all to buffer this rather unattractive 1980s. And we needed the drainage anyway, so put it in a place where it makes these lots at least, more valuable because they have a better view than the back end of a 30-year-old rental development that's owned by a REE that doesn't really keep it up very nicely. We have to put in bike paths, very detailed landscaping requirements for the internal roadway system, enormous debates about whether the sidewalk would be 7 feet or 8 feet wide, and if it was 8 feet wide, could we use it as a multi-purpose trail and therefore have bicycles still in it? Some of these meetings are such a yawner for me, and I'm like, please, just, do I have to attend this? But, you know, you work it through and come up. This is part of doing a PUD, is that you have to design everything. It's as if you don't have a zoning code for it.
So a question, please. In terms of development, how easy it is, how easy is the city allow this project to happen?
How is it? Is it working it through the city?
Yes.
I mean, what is it like?
How easy the city make it
Redevelopment projects
Yeah.
are way more complicated than raw dirt.
Oh, okay.
When I was doing the stuff in the 1980s and into the 90s, and we were doing stuff in Western Broward County, all the communities that you have in Pembroke Pines and Miramar, you didn't have any neighbors. You had cows. That was it. Cows didn't object. Every redevelopment project has an established neighborhood around it, has residents who either like or don't like what you're doing, and they all have social media. And Facebook and Twitter have absolutely changed the entitlement process. Every project that I have that is going to have any level of controversy, the second consultant we hire, we should update your slide, is a social media expert. Because I can tell you a nightmare about one I had where we had actually presented, it was a golf course redevelopment. By the way, I've actually suggested the site should become a tilapia farm. Just dig it out and put fish in it. I'm just done with it. But we had a community meeting on a Tuesday night presenting 5 different scenarios for where the park would go in this 50 acres redevelopment site. And within a week, there was a Save the Golf Course webpage, Facebook page, a MoveOn.org petition opposing the redevelopment, and my client said, I won't tell you what expletive he used, but he moved on, because redevelopment with neighborhood opposition, very hard to overcome in many circumstances.
Is that in Hollywood?
That's what I was going to say. Yeah, the Hollywood.
Nightmare. The city, by the way, is thinking of buying it now and turning it into park and police headquarters.
By the way, another myth about redevelopment or infill is that, gee, this should be easy because all the infrastructure's there. Well, guess what? That's the time everybody says, that pipe's not good enough. We have to improve that pipe. It's 40 years old.
Well,
So
well, let's talk about Sunset.
Yeah.
Sunset, that neighborhood is on septic tanks. We would have had to have run public sewer to that site, made the development costs, by the way, all the neighborhood opposition aside.
Sure, but Johnson.
Yeah, the neighborhood opposition was one thing, but the development costs of that site were at a site, because you had to bring sewer to the neighborhood. That mile run was a fortune.
and then little things like, school doesn't have enough capacity, or it's at capacity now, or the green belt ratio to that neighborhood, this would create too many units for the amount of parks there are, and so, I mean, it's amazing what you open up by bringing in something that's old and you want to fix it.
Well, look at what's just happened in the city of Fort Lauderdale. Fort Lauderdale's downtown sewer problem. You know, I actually fault this, and I actually said this to Jack Seiler. All you had to do, was the outgoing mayor of Fort Lauderdale, all you had to do was ask my guys to upsize the sewer lines. You always asked us to upsize the water lines because they had to meet fire flow, but nobody asked us to upsize the sewer lines. We would have done it. Developers want to be able to flush toilets. You can't flush a toilet, you're not getting a building permit.
What goes up must go down. But to your most obscure discussion, I had witnessed in a planning and zoning meeting with students actually for a class, was the discussion about the amount of traffic in that street, the two parcels redevelopment into 4 or 5 townhomes would cause on that dead-end street. There had been a 10% of approved level, measured level in that street, and they opposed because they would get too much traffic.
Well, I have a great one too. One of my favorite hearings was a project on Diplomat Parkway in Hallandale, and the neighbors were opposing our development because people speed down the road. So we said, look, we're happy to put in traffic calming. We'll put in a circle, we'll put in some humps. This is, no, we don't want that. We just don't want anybody speeding. Well, okay. Then they said, we don't want extra, you're going to overclog the road. I said, well, you know, people can speed there because there's no cars on the road. They didn't quite make that connection. So, this is part of, this was raw dirt. We had to extend an entire utility system, staying away from the raw water lines that were already there since the 1970s. The other thing was, the city didn't quite know where the raw water lines were, or whether they were in the easements that the client had provided. So they had to do this, they did a X-ray of the ground, I don't know what the machine is called, but they had to X-ray the entire 85 acres to identify where the raw water lines were so that we could give easements. This made a surveyor stream. They had to give new easements with the raw water lines, and they also needed to know what they had to stay away from and how we had to plan around them. It's fascinating.
It's a great mystery on a constant basis of where it happens to all the as-built drawings on anything. I mean, community I live in, which started in 1978, 79, we can't find any as-built development drawings anywhere.
I think the world will change now that everything's computerized, but going back to the stuff from the 70s, the 80s, even the 90s, there's just nothing out there. You make it up or you find it.
We did a jazz workshop or jazz shop. We did scan in the road plans and the piping plans of the city of Wilmington, Delaware. Like literally hundreds of plans, big block flat plans. Scanned them, rectified them, and digitized them so they actually could trace down the pipes. And for some sections, they have been looking at those plans and like, where are the pipes? You don't know about those. Wooden pipes in place. Like literally, put it into the ground and forget about it until it collapses.
That's our world. So these were the renderings we showed. You can keep that in mind when we show you what the real product ended up looking like. Again, this was the phase 1 ZOM product. We were not talking at all about what kind of product would come in or the look of the product in the other 2 phases because we were not in for site plan approval. Again, these might actually be actuals of other developments, not the one, these were things we used during the permitting. This is, by the way, this presentation we used at the Planning and Zoning Board and City Commission for hearings, so. Examples of the kind of interior finishes. We were coming in as a rental community, you know, and this is 2010, 2012. People still, to this day, don't understand that how many of you live in places that you rent? I mean, you're nice people. You're not those people. I don't know who those people are yet, but there are communities that say they don't want rentals. Now, in this day and age, that's absurd. But we had to show that the rentals were really going to be a high quality. Again, that's the same slide. We had to show them what was going to be, you know, what's the size of the units, what's your average monthly rents. Interestingly, coming out of the land use plan amendment process, we were required at the county as part of that process, because we didn't increase the number of units, but we were changing the underlying land use. On the county map, that underlying land use was commercial recreation. We had to change that to residential, using those 907 units that we already had in the kitty. But in the course of that, the county required that we set aside 15% of these units for affordable housing. Affordable under the county definition means for individuals earning between 80% and 120 at that time. Today it's 140% of the area median income. It was easy for ZOM to do that. They actually do, one of their divisions does affordable housing, so they understand income requirements, eligibility, etc. And interestingly enough, that at the time, these one bedrooms and the 2 bedrooms met the affordability standard for workforce housing in Broward County. So setting aside 15% for them was a non-issue. For some developers, particularly if you have for sale product, way more complicated. But in a rental community, it's quite frankly much easier. Let me show you the finished product. Thomas, if you could, any questions on process? And this went on, we had to go to, I would say in the course of this project, we probably had 16 to 20 public hearings. Because you go through the city and the county. At the city, you go to at least 4 boards. You go to the Architectural Appearance Committee, you go to the Planning and Zoning Board, the City Commission, and in some respects, we would also go to their Zoning Board of Appeals, although we didn't have any on those because we made up our own zoning. So this is, the client was kind enough to send me the finished product. Phase 1, Lozano, is what it became called. This is actually the clubhouse. You too could live in this community if they have any vacancies. I don't know if they do. There's that lake. This, by the way, lovely fountain. It's also an aeration device. If you ever wondered why they put these fountains in these lakes, just to make them pretty, no. It keeps the water circulating, it keeps the water quality at what it's supposed to be in these lakes. Again, a little bit more perspective on it.
But that's Photoshop, is it?
No, this is for real.
With a fountain active like that?
Yeah.
That's nice. Okay.
Yeah.
Great photo.
This is their interior reception area. They have a business center for their tenants, so that if you want to hold a corporate meeting or business meeting, you've got space. Pretty sexy pool. Could be a resort pool. Outdoor lanai. Again, this is all part of the clubhouse. You can get a sense of why these lease up. Look at the rates, look at the neighborhood, the accessibility. Kind of pretty. Real interior units. Gym. Okay, Atlantico. Atlantico is a 211 unit rental done by Florida Crystals. That was the piece along the bottom. They also did flats. A little bit different quality and feel. I don't know what their rents or how they compare to Zoms. But they're also, you know, they're still providing an amenitized package.
Did you have any issues with being close to turnpike for the road noise and stuff like that?
That's the home builder's gonna deal with that. We'll show you that unit. Okay, this is Vantage. Vantage is a 160 unit for sale product being done by Home Dynamics. I don't think they're finished or sold out, I'm not sure.
The sugar company ones are rentals or?
Rentals. This is their starter single-family home. They may be doing some townhouse also, it looks like. Oh, that's all they sent us. Yeah. The biggest debate we had when we brought the site plan through for Home Dynamics was the width of the lots. They wanted very narrow lots. The city had approved that, I think they're 36-foot wide lots, pretty narrow. And the city had approved that as part of our RPUD. And when they came back and they said, we really approved that? And I said, yeah, you approved it. So we had it by right. We did site plan approval and, you know, it's in place and being built. So, questions, comments?
What was the other project you mentioned in Hollywood?
In Hollywood,
What was the issue with the golf course? Is that,
Hollywood, there's a old, it's an executive course that's only open 4 months out of the year as golf. It is currently being used, I'm told, as a paintball field. Yeah, they play paintball there, I don't know. It's about 50 acres. It's called Sunset Golf Course. It's on the just east side of 95, north of Johnson Street.
okay, so not the
No.
Hollywood Beach.
No, this is not, no. This one is kind of tucked in this neighborhood, nobody knew about it. It had really kind of interesting development issues. For example, the neighborhood, which has virtually no drainage. Neighborhood was built in the 1950s and 60s, floods on a regular basis. Those homes are at an elevation of 4.5, as is the golf course. Today, if you go in to develop that site, you're gonna have to bring it up to at least a minimum floor elevation of 8 foot something. What happens, and you're not allowed to drain into the neighborhood. You gotta retain everything on site. So now that 50 acres, I think almost a quarter of it had to be dedicated to retention, wet retention. So that was why we went into the site and started evaluating it. You need that much wet retention, we need open space, why don't we just give the half, the preference of the developer was to give the half closest to I-95 to the city as a park with a big lake in it, really big lake in it. And then the other half, they were gonna do single family and apartments, and we had different configurations. And the neighborhood basically said we wanted as open space. And given the development costs, the neighborhood opposition, the client literally said, I'm out of here. I want nothing to do with it. Now it's just sitting, it's a paintball course, so.
You know, it may be a good time, we can switch this a little bit and talk about it, at least mention about it. We have been, to this day, talking to you almost entirely about South Florida and what the conditions are in South Florida and what are required in South Florida, both not only from a regulation government point of view, but also from a geological point of view and environmental point of view and so forth. You're entering an industry that is not restricted to South Florida. I suggest that there is a number of you in this room, I don't know how many, but I suggest that in the not too far future, you will be living and working somewhere else in the United States. Even other parts of Florida are different. In other words, like if I tell you, if you were going to develop in Denver, just for an illustration, I've done a lot of development in Denver. There are totally different soil conditions and land conditions. There they have what they call expansive soils. It's very unstable. a lot of the slabs of the houses literally float and go up and down poles because the land shifts that much. You can go develop up in Georgia and South Carolina and there's no percolation. It's all clay. The water does not go through the clay. So there you have all different kinds of drainage issues. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about Texas?
Depends on where in Texas. There's a big difference. Because I've developed in Austin, Houston, Dallas, and San Antonio. So I've been in all four markets. Dallas is a higher elevation, different soil than Houston. Houston is very much like South Florida. It's low, it's wet, and so you can't say, okay, here's the conditions of Texas. You have to go to each individual market. But contrary, and this is where I would part with Greg, what he said this morning, that he's finding that all entitlement is the same everywhere he goes today. I can't accept that. There's nothing worse in the world than entitlement work in the state of California.
I was about to say that.
This is a cakewalk compared to California.
Outside of specific laws and regulations and that could be specific to some countries, how applicable are these concepts could be in different countries?
How the what?
How applicable?
Applicable.
I don't know how to answer that.
Well, I think that the basic, and I honestly have really only practiced in Florida, but I have partners who do what I do in Virginia and DC and California. It's the same basic concepts. You have zoning, you have drainage issues, you have the same issues. They're just unique in the way that they manifest themselves. The way you do them a little differently in each place. California is completely unique because it has a process called CEQA, Comprehensive Environmental Quality Act. I don't know what the rest of it means.
That's what it is.
Yeah?
California Environmental Quality Act.
So CEQA, to give you an idea of how far CEQA, I have one of my law partners who's based in San Francisco, told me one recently about the way that CEQA has been used to prevent development. CEQA was recently used by an anti-abortion group to oppose a Planned Parenthood clinic on the grounds that the CEQA analysis did not take into account the noise coming from protesters outside the clinic. Yeah. I don't know where this one ends up, but that gives you a sense of how far opposition will stretch regulation to use it to benefit their opposition effort.
Okay, I'm all about the zoning thing, and so because I worked in it and I love teaching planning law. If that is the case, I live like half a mile down the street from Plantation Elementary School, and I find it ridiculous. Don't quote me on this. How much traffic jam and extra effort has to be done for parents dropping off and or picking up, like literally down the street, good mile, car by car, bumper by bumper. And the school was put in place and that traffic demand was not really planned for and or considered. And then it goes with the same thing of nuisances, of land uses we are putting in place and then we don't know about it. I remember court cases in Germany, we don't really have it here in the US, about people buying a house and then complaining about that the beautiful Catholic church across the street is making noises from the bell tower on Sunday morning. Or in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, people would buy the brand new townhomes on the countryside, and they're like small little village, and move in November, create new Thanksgiving festival, and then complain in spring that the dairy farmer across the street, that used to be part of that development, is using manure to put out on the fields for fertilizers. So this is a very bizarre thing that we are developing, accepting society, culture, and identity in places, and then we complain about them. This is so
Well, there's a
bizarre.
big difference between complaining and what's embedded in laws and rules and regulations. I mean, I'm not saying that complaints are not something serious you gotta deal with, but that you can deal with it. But if something's black and white, and say this is the law and this is what you gotta do. I was a lead consultant for a company called, Newhall Land and Farming Company, the largest landholder in the state of California. And they have a piece of property called the Newhall Ranch. It's 12,000 acres. They started processing in the year 1990. They still don't have one unit approved yet. And I worked on another project in Santa Barbara County a few years ago. I was the head chief of the due diligence team, and Santa Barbara County is crazier than the rest of the state of California. And we talked, going back to what we talked about this morning, we were I represented the finance partners, and the land was owned by an oil company. So it was a partnership. They decided in the partnership, because it's California, that they were not going to proceed with full development until they got all of their entitlement permits. So they said to me and my partner and some other people, we don't care what it costs, but put a team together to get everything done up front. Everything. I mean, we had 65 people on the due diligence team. We spent $14 million. Took 2 years to assemble all the information and everything. We made our first run at the planning council. And we had massaged the planning. I went in people's homes and sat in their living rooms with my partner, actually making one-on-one presentations, hoping these people didn't show up at the hearing the next night. And the very worst thing that could have happened to us happened to us. We didn't know this, a week before our hearing, 3 of the 5 people on the planning commission resigned and retired. And everything we had worked for and targeted for and everything, we were wiped out to 0. And but our target, by the way, to start construction was still 7 years away, even if we got through that. So everything I just want to mention is prepare you that it's important that you understand the mechanisms and the methodologies here, but be prepared. In our business, wherever you go, you've got to learn what goes on in that town, in that neighborhood, in that everything, because it's going to be different.
You know, and Tony raises a really interesting point, and this is going to sound terrible, but you know, all those large companies that have in-house everything, they hire local counsel.
Yeah.
They hire me and my compatriots because I'm the one who said I had actually turned away some folks from some business recently. This was about a month or so ago. A potential client calls me and says, we're trying to get this property under contract. By the way, it's in the city of Fort Lauderdale. We have until March 12th to make our go, no-go decision, go hard or not. I said, you're 1 day off. What do you mean? So the election's the 13th. I can tell you what I think is going to happen, which, by the way, is what happened. And if that happens, then you are taking on a real challenge for development of that particular parcel because of where it's located and everything else. So he said, what should I do? I said, get a 30-day extension. Whatever it costs you, pay another $5 grand, get a 30-day extension. Because if this race goes the way it is, all you'll have lost is $5 grand and not 500 grand. And they actually got that 30-day extension, and they'll be back to me looking for a different site. Now, interestingly, part of my obligation is to tell them, don't do this. You know, you need to be listening. I think it's the obligation of your professionals to tell you when to back off also, or when the risk is too great. So having local counsel or who understands the community, and you know, I started by saying I practice law and I practice politics, because you really have to be aware of these things. I had a situation, when Tony, you mentioned your planning and zoning board, we had a situation a number of years ago, if you all remember, there was a time when there were 3 members of the Broward County Commission who were under investigation or indictment, and they weren't coming to meetings. So we were having a 6-member commission all the time, which meant you had to get 5 out of those 6 to vote for you. We pulled back projects and said, I'm waiting till I have a full commission. It's a much bigger thing than what's right in front of you, at least in the entitlement process. And then you get your entitlements, then you got to build the damn thing. So now you have to be working closely with that same governmental entity to make sure that your construction plans go through as planned, and on the schedule you need. So building the relationships with a broad base within the municipality, and this is something, Chris, you're going to learn, is going to be really important.
Okay. Here's the good news. Because in all honesty, we've been really beating you up over there. I mean that. We've been telling you about these burdensome, these negatives, these realities, and you got to sit there if you're new to this business and everything and say, why bother?
You make a lot of money if you do it right.
So, yes, there's large risks, large rewards, but remember what we try to cover today. Less than 5% of the people who claim to be in the real estate industry are really developers and actually go through this. The rest of our business, our industry, is taking care of the billions and billions of square feet of things that we built already, of taking care of the 120 million houses that we built already, and all these other things. And want to make sure we leave you with a balanced look, viewpoint of all this. Yes, there's all these horrors and everything, and yes, you really have to have a stomach of steel for this, because I mean, even you, as a top advisor, you lose some of these things. They're heart-wrenching.
And you lose it typically. In our business, if you get, they're surprises. The losses are surprises. They're not, because if you think you're going to lose something, we'll pull back sooner, like the one in Sunset said, not worth the battle. I'm out of here. You can be halfway through a process, you bang your head against the wall, you're out of here. When we get to a public hearing and that vote goes south for some reason, it's overwhelming.
It tears your guts out. It doesn't even have to be a public meeting. Just walking into a staff meeting sometimes, and that you were with these people a week before and everybody was happy and they're serving you coffee and everything. You go back the next week and they're like, they got their guns out, they're ready to kill you for something. You say, what happened in the last week or something? I had a project like that. I was a consultant on a project out in Santa Clara, California. And very, very difficult property. It was 140 acres right on San Francisco Bay. And anyway, so I was helping them. And we had a couple of Debbies working for us who were trailblazing out in front, and the mayor of Fremont, that's the town we were in, that's the same town, by the way, that the Tesla plant is in. And so Tony, come out, we're having lunch with the mayor and his staff, and it's gonna be a kumbaya meeting. And so we go, couple of other consultants, a land planner and this and everything, and it was. We had a kumbaya lunch, and we had sin and everything, and then all of a sudden, I swear to God, I mean, you had to be there. You had to be there to see that. This mayor gets up, and he starts walking around the table. And he's walking, and he says, "This has not gone well." It was like, what? You know, like, what are you talking about? Is in there. He says, "You people have run ahead of me with this project, and you've embarrassed me in the public." Like, we just had a happy lunch with this guy. It's the same meeting. I mean, we're like in shock, okay? And these are the kind of things happen, and the project imploded. They made a corporate decision to put this land on the shelf for 3 years.
So let me give a happy story, though.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll give you a happy story.
It's easier then to probably approach projects, just staff approval instead of having to go to the commissioner.
But you were required to go to the commission. There's
For rezoning, but if you don't want to do the rezoning.
no. Excuse me.
You got it.
There is no rule on, every jurisdiction is different about whether you can get an administrative approval, which would be a staff level, or you have to go to public hearing. And whether it's site plan, rezoning, land use plan amendment, those are your big three. In some jurisdictions, every site plan goes to the city commission. In some jurisdictions, you go to the planning and zoning board for your site plan with the commission's ability to call it up. So it's not, you don't choose to just have a staff level approval. You get through staff, and then you first go into the public fray. But let me give you a happy story, and I think a really important leadership lesson. I've had the privilege of representing the South Broward Hospital District for a very long time. In 2006, they wanted to build the Joe DiMaggio Children's Hospital, and they had a commitment to the neighborhood, the Hollywood Hills area, that they would not go east of 35th until it was a 20-year period. I think it ran out in 04. So by 06, they came to me and said, "We want to build this, and we have to do this master plan, and we need to do all of this stuff, and can you help us?" And we put together a zoning tool using an interlocal agreement, because the hospital district is a governmental entity in the city of Hollywood, and they can talk in a document in a certain way that allowed us to do things that you couldn't do between two private parties. The first public hearing at this, for this big master plan that was going to be the 20-year plan for Memorial in Hollywood. We go to the Planning and Zoning Board because they have to make a recommendation to the City Commission. Sitting next to me is the then CEO of the district, Frank Sacco. Frank had run the district for 20 plus years. He retired 2 years ago. Phenomenal human being. Transformed a public hospital into really the amazing institution that Memorial Healthcare System is today. Very cool, very powerful person. He is sitting next to me at this Planning and Zoning Board meeting, and it is not going well. The then chair, Josh Levy, today mayor of the city of Hollywood, by the way, is the president of the Hollywood Hills Civic Association. So he is using his role as the Hollywood Hills Civic Association and the chair of the P&Z to shoot as many holes as he can in our proposal. And he was vicious about it. I won't tell you what, we leave there with a recommendation of denial. We walk out of we're in the parking lot. It's now 1 o'clock in the morning, and Frank is screaming at the moon about Josh. Calm him down, and he says, tomorrow, in my office. Okay, go into his office. He has every department head from the Memorial Healthcare System. And he says to me, now I hadn't slept that night, because I figured I took responsibility for this. It's my job. I'm the front. I should have gotten a recommendation of approval. Frank comes in and says, Debbie, what can we do to give you success, to help you succeed in this project? We have a problem for you. What can we, our team, do? He was done screaming at the moon. He turned around a negative and gave his team, with me at the head of the entitlement team, the power and ability to transform a negative into a positive. That, to me, is the greatest sign of a leader in terms of, you're the client now, what's your leadership style, and how, when things go bad, don't beat up the team, empower the team. Because if you have the right team, like the folks that we had working with us, we're gonna figure that out. So we did. Today, and soon after that, we found the things that were the key issues for the neighborhood. We figured out ways to address their issues. It also helped that we went to the city commission. We had 400 representatives of Memorial, former patients, employees, everybody else, most of whom spoke at that hearing. The city commission actually had to set up chairs in the library, in the lawn, in closed circuit television, and we had teams of people who came out and talked about why this expansion was important to them and to the community. It worked. Today, though, we just had an amendment, by the way. Joe DiMaggio Children's Hospital just got approved to double in size. And literally 2 weeks ago, got that approval with Josh Levy, the mayor, leading the charge and approving it, because he recognized that Memorial did what they said they were going to do vis-a-vis the surrounding community. We have a master plan that we're now implementing, and and everybody sings Kumbaya. You can get, you can get yourself back on track after the rug's been pulled out from under you. But it takes a lot of work, and it takes folks to, you can't feel demoralized. And you as the client, because hopefully you'll all be my clients someday, you need to understand that bad things happen, and we have to pick ourselves up and move on.
That's no different than talking about making mistakes and growing from them and going something positive. Let me, on this whole vein, while we're got a little while to go, one thing that in where I am in life and what I've done in my limited, small 15 minutes of fame is one of the recognitions of what we are in the real estate industry. And what I mean by that is, a number of years ago, I was with my wife and we were driving around Miramar. I don't know why we were driving around Miramar, but we were in Miramar. And so, I think we were trying to head towards I-75 or something. And I said to my wife, I said, I built a whole bunch of houses around here somewhere. And she says, well, where? I said, I don't know. I said, she says, what was the name of the project? And I said, I think it was called Franklin Farms. And are you familiar with it?
Yeah, my childhood house is in there.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so I said, but I don't know where, I don't remember where it is. I mean, I've built so many communities and projects, I can't possibly, literally, I know it sounds terrible, but I can't remember them all. And so we found it, and there it was. And when we built it, we bought a piece of dirt. It was all dredged, it was raised, but it was all sand and a lake in the middle. So it was semi-developed. We still had to finish the infrastructure. We still had to do all that. Anyway, we did, and we designed a bunch of houses, and we built these houses. I think we built about 180 houses. So we're driving through Franklin Farms, and now all the landscaping is up, the trees are growing, there's shade, and there's kids playing, and there's a guy washing his car, and my wife says to me, she says, do you ever stop to think about the impact your work has on people? That you didn't build all these houses yourself, but you led the whole thing and you did all that. Look how you affected all these people. These people live here. This is their shelter. This is where they're growing their kids. This is where everything. And that really shocked me because I never thought of myself in that regard. But I was very proud of myself at that moment. And I never forgot that how that resonated with me. And so when I needed to feel good, because things weren't going so good or something, I would say, you know, I'm a very lucky human being because I've come, I've been born, and I'm going to die, and I actually left something behind that you could see and touch. And how many people go through life and pass through the universe and everything, and there's absolutely no evidence at all that that person ever existed. I know that sounds a little heavy philosophically, but I've shared that with other major developers and everything, and I find that many have had the same thoughts and the same appreciation of themselves. So maybe you want to keep that in mind too, of the business you're going into, that if you're part of it, you're part of a team where you're actually touching this thing that's going to stay and remain behind and so forth. You've done something very special in life, and particularly if it's a hospital or it's, you know, a good neighborhood and so forth. So the other thing I wanted to mention to you, I had the opportunity, that was on my notes for this morning, and I want Debbie to jump in on this. How important it is for you to network in this industry, and how important it is for you to be part of the industry and not part of a single organization. Because we are an industry of networks. And we believe, I mean, I think I'm speaking for Debbie, and I want her to expound on this, that the Urban Land Institute is about the best, ULI. I can personally tell you that every major step along the way, except my first one, in real estate, that I went from this company to that company to this thing to this thing, every one of them came about because of my network in the ULI. That people contacted me to consider or take over businesses and so forth that came through a ULI network person. And I'm not saying the ULI is the only one. NAIOP is great. I mean, you know, there's good organizations around. But get involved. Meet friends, because those people will network with you. They'll network with you for life. And it doesn't cost you anything. Sometimes you got to do them a favor, sometimes they do you a favor. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, and I'll talk about it from a lawyer standpoint to a certain extent. It's very hard to get lawyers to network. I don't know. I mean, lawyers are just, you know, litigators. What are they going to say? They can't talk about their cases. You know, trust estates. I had a lot of people die last week. You know, and then there's a land use lawyer. Our stuff's really kind of cool. I had a case just last week when you talked about the cows. I'm working on a manure case right now. It's really fascinating.
Sure.
I know that sounds really weird, but clients complaining about manure surrounding his ever-growing residential area. Interesting. The ability to continue to expand your network and to get input from other folks is really what keeps you fresh also. I mean, it gets you started and then it keeps you fresh. And you have to keep, I think, building on it. I also, the ULI has been a phenomenal resource for me on a bunch of different levels. I've had city commissioners, when I'm trying to pitch a parking variance, a reduction in parking, and city commissioners from the podium, because they know I'm involved in ULI, say, what did the ULI study say about this? Now, the commissioner's looking for political cover behind ULI, and they know my connection to that, and we work it in the chambers. But I also believe that it's really important as a professional to be involved in the things you really believe in. The organizations, whether it's a charity or a,
What about your involvement in the women's movement?
well, I was gonna get to that too.
Okay.
But, right, I'll just give you an example. A couple of years ago, about 3 years ago, when I changed law firms, I was going through, I was turning 60. It was time to change some things up. And one of the things I committed to was getting more involved in homelessness issues and affordable housing. They were two things that I was both, passionate about and had resources. So I got involved in the Broward Partnership for the Homeless, and got asked as city commissioner to appoint me to the City of Fort Lauderdale Affordable Housing Advisory Committee. Now, all of those are networking opportunities. Let me tell you what happened. 2 weeks into my serving on this Affordable Housing Committee, one of the members, a gentleman named Mitch Rosenstein, who is a affordable housing developer, came up to me and said, I see you're on the BPHI Board of Directors. It's the Broward Partnership for the Homeless, a homelessness facility in Fort Lauderdale. Do you think they'd be interested in a development opportunity? I have an idea. He shared it with me, I shared it with the chair. We are working on a joint venture right now between BPHI and this private sector developer, and it's gonna rock this world. It'll be the first mixed income, including permanent supportive housing for formerly homeless people in Broward County. And that was two networking opportunities that came together and converged. Now, part of the reason that it all happens is you gotta believe in the things you're going out for. Don't just join an organization because you think it's the good organization to join. Join the thing that you believe in, and then get involved in it. A very wise man, Mel Greenberg, once said to me, you should never join an organization that you don't want to chair. It's a great motto. And on this Affordable Housing Advisory Committee I was on, I've been on it for a year and a half. A couple months ago, the chairman decided that he wanted to resign. Quite frankly, he had been at it too long. And someone on the board said to me, Debbie, would you run? And would you be willing to be chair? And I said, well, I'm going to either leave or lead, because the board wasn't doing anything. So I'm now chair of this board, and we are shaking things up a little bit in the city of Fort Lauderdale on how they spend their $700,000 a year in state money to build affordable housing. They've been doing it in a way that our board doesn't want to do it anymore. We're going to shake things up. So, getting back to networking. I've been very involved in, I've been involved in women's issues for obvious reasons. I was telling Fallon a little earlier, when I started in this business, which was really in 1980, there were no women doing anything in land development at a leadership level. Just didn't exist. I was fortunate enough to have a number of men who were great mentors, who didn't view gender as an issue, and helped support me throughout my career. It wasn't, I moved from DC to Florida in 1982, 1980, and it was by 82 I realized that Florida was so far behind that I needed to get more involved in women's issues. Fast forward, been involved in various women's leadership type programs, and in 2010, I got a call from a woman who was then the COO of GE Capital, and we were all feeling the pinch of the recession, and we had a little extra time on our hands, so she asked ULI for the name of 12 women with, as she put it, gravitas, who were active in ULI, and would we form a women's leadership initiative, the mission of which would be to expand the role of women within ULI and within the real estate industry. That small group of 12 women who had lunch one day in New York City in December of 2010 has now grown to a nationwide, actually an international network of women's leadership groups throughout the real estate, throughout ULI and the real estate community, going as far in Europe and in Asia. And again, that was one woman making a phone call, getting 12 together, and that network has now expanded to this huge initiative. If you go to the ULI website, go to the WLI page, and you can have a sense of what goes on. We have a very active group in South Florida. It's currently chaired by Jenny Borjon, who is the executive director of the Fort Lauderdale DBA, and Katie Hathorn, she is a landscape architect at EDSA. They chair the Southeast Florida Caribbean District Council Women's Leadership Initiative and are doing gangbusters. One of the things they make a point of doing is that it's not just about women, it's about inclusiveness for everyone. And I think that that's much of the success of the whole WLI effort internationally. So yeah, you gotta get out there, get out of your space. And you never know who or where the next business deal is gonna come from. Because you're gonna meet people and start talking and you clicks, and the next thing you know, you got a deal going.
Let me add one more comment to that. I've been all over the place in my personal career, by field and in geography. Staying friends with those you make as friends in the classroom is very important. There are big universities, you just not get an awesome degree, but you get that networking with your $100,000 tuition. Stay friends, make friends and stay friends with your fellow classmates. I had a recent talk with 2 alumni, they're running a small company, they had about 2 years ago a massive clash with classmates in the other classmate caused that clash. 2 years later, that classmate is back in South Florida after some business adventures in the north, coming back and reaching out to them. Burned bridges. Yeah? Maybe a great opportunity passed, but those 2 guys basically said, he burned bridges, that other guy burned bridges years ago with us on a fundamental, personal, human being, conversational level. So keep that in mind. You're making friends here, you're connecting. If you're staying in the region or even outside of the region, don't forget with whom you went to school with. This is one of the great resources. I still have the 5-6 people that went through me through a doctoral program. We're still connected. And that's something really big brewing right now on the more service components to give good things to the world. Those brewing, let's say it like this. I would like you guys to make comments on burning bridges, please.
I'm sorry, we formed the advisory board of this program about 4 or 5 years ago, formed or laid out the parameters of an alumni group for this program. And they told me at the last meeting 30-something people showed up. Many of them stay in contact with each other in the classroom. Of course, these things drift away. And you might want to know that at any one time, there are 2 to 3 alumni, young graduates like you, on our advisory board. They sit equal with us on the advisory board. So it isn't like, well, I got my degree and someday, 10, 20 years from now, they're going to invite me to the table. We're trying to do just the opposite, because this is your program, this is your career. We do this because we have a passion for helping you. We don't, obviously we don't get paid for this, and it's some of us, it's a good feeling to give back, and that's why we mentor. That's why we've been involved with this program, and so I think we say that proudly of each other.
Yeah.
By the way, this lady also was chairman of the South Florida ULI District Council for 2 years. I mean, so.
Yeah, I was lucky. That was interesting.
I was chairman.
You were chair too.
We've been trying hard. I mean, those of us who believe in this, in the ULI and in other ways, to diversify. Yes, this has been an all-male industry, almost at every turn. I started many years ago when I had the power to do it, that I would insist my HR people would hire more, look for more women, look for more people of color. I said, we've got to start somewhere. And today, I think about 35% of ULI members are female now. And that number's growing. I think not too long it's going to be over 50%. Because the schools, particularly, are filled with women who will take the lead in this industry. I'm very positive about that.
What were you gonna ask us, Thomas?
Yeah, I would like to ask you maybe reflect some of the moments you had in terms to the topic of humble person versus burn the bridges. Because if we present the good and the bad cases for development as projects, could you reflect somehow, it's a really complicated, weird question, but burn bridges, like the ethics of doing business with each other. Let's say the other, do it in a positive way. What are you looking for in some partners and people about the ethics of doing business with each other?
Well, your reputation is everything. I mean, I think you got to start with that. That the most respected people, the most cooperative people, the most attractive people are people who respect other people and treat them as, you know, as good as human beings. But as Debbie said, leaders who make everybody feel they're part of the solution and not part of the problem. That I talked about this before privately. The thing in life, when you look back, I mean, I wish there's a way we can reverse life. I wish I knew when I was 35 years old what I know now. I mean, I would have had a much better life, much greater life. But I had a great life, and I have a great life. Is that you know, you just got to work hard, and leadership is really, really important, and you gotta practice it. You have to respect people, and burning bridges most times are unrecoverable. That you damage yourself for life. So I think if there's one thing I'm proud of, and I know she is, and I don't want to speak for Debbie, is that she has an impeccable reputation. I mean, it is, because she can look you in the eye, whether she wins or she loses or whatever, and she knows, and you know, that she's done the very best she could for what, you know, she's doing. And she's, you know, and she's working for you and doing that, and she respects people.
You're very
So,
sweet.
Hmm?
You're very sweet.
Make you cry?
No.
No, but we go back a while.
Yeah.
So, I don't know if I answered your question. The point is, you know, sometimes you have a hard time with somebody. You know, I got a kick out of Craig this morning when he said that when he borrowed money from his family early on, he realized that was a mistake. So I wanted to say, must have made for a lousy Thanksgiving. Because Thanksgivings are tough enough. And he said, I learned how to stop borrowing money from my family. And so the point, you know, I guess the point is that when the world finds out or knows about you, knows about your integrity, knows you're an honest person, that loan gets easier. That permit gets easier. There's no doubt in my mind, and I'm not blowing smoke at myself. I mean, when you walk in a room and you're respected, they don't even have to tell you, you know. And oh, I know what I was saying. What you want, hopefully in life, is to get up in the morning and can't wait to go do your work. And where work is so gratifying for you, and you're so glad you're participating. I can tell you over and over again that people like that are in a venue or in an environment where they're respected, where they're contributing, where they feel part of the whole thing, they don't even care how much money they make. I mean, they want to make money, they want to be fairly treated and everything, but it's not the driving force. It's the accomplishment, it's being there, and it's not just the boss with the scissor cutting the ribbon. but it's you with the boss cutting the ribbon because you're part of the team and you're part of that. So you gotta earn that. It's not easy. And if you have an out with somebody, find a way to get friends again. I mean.
Let me add something to that.
No, I'll finish, okay.
Which I think is kind of, it is very easy in this business to mislead people. You can make up the traffic numbers, you can make up, you know, a lot of stuff, and the public doesn't really, even staff sometimes doesn't really know the difference. Now, if you do that, people eventually going to figure it out. And the next time you come back, they're not going to believe you. It's very simple. You have to deal straight with people. And in terms of the burning the bridges, the first thing that struck me, Thomas, when you asked that question was, I can tell you who I know I want to do business with. And I don't burn bridges with folks who I don't want to do business with. You just don't do business with them. You don't want to be one of the people on the list that people don't want to do a deal with.
And then you want to work for them either.
And right.
You don't want to work for anybody that's.
And it's very interesting in terms of dealing. I make it a point to have a good relationship with virtually all the staff in the jurisdictions where I work. From the secretary who answers the phone, who, by the way, is the most critical person to getting an appointment. They got to know that they like you, that you treat them with the same respect that you do the mayor. And by the way, that secretary can sometimes be more important than the mayor.
The gatekeeper.
The gatekeeper, absolutely. But I have had elected officials and staff people say to me, you know, Deb, you tell us the good, the bad, and the ugly, and that's true. I said earlier that projects have warts on them. They do. And I tell people what the warts are. Now, do we give them a solution to the warts? Yes, if we can. If we can't, sometimes you're just going to have to accept that wart. That's the way it is. But if you tell them the good, the bad, and the ugly, they know that you're dealing straight with them and you figure stuff out together. The other thing is, don't ever throw anybody under the bus publicly. Absolutely the worst thing to do, particularly with staff. They will never talk to you, they will not trust you, they will not take your call or set your meeting. But when you need them, they will remember that when they screwed up something, you dealt with it quietly and didn't publicly embarrass them or throw them under the bus in any way. That goes to the people you work with, the staff, etc. Deal with your bad stuff. You don't need to deal with it on Twitter or the television set. Although there are some elected officials who choose to do that, but I won't go there today. Yeah, sorry, couldn't resist. And, you know, I really think that you got only one reputation. And it's really, it's a tough business that we're in, that there are people who will say and do anything, but everybody else figures that out. I mean, when I had a community group say to me, Debbie, would you please handle, we hope you will handle this project because we know you'll be straight with us. There's nothing better